You're listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft, the people who play it. Today is January 19th, 2025, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I am joined today, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing on this fine Sunday?
Oh, Spencer, hello. Good morning to you. Morning record. You know how that goes. Trying to boot up the old brain.
That's
here.
Right.
I mean, morning's almost over, but it's still early for me. So
I definitely had the issue of what day of the week is it? Do I need to record something? Yes, I do need to record something today.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, so here we are. So obviously we're super well prepared and ready to go. And I cannot be responsible for anything that my brain produces out of my mouth this morning.
Oh, come on now.
Here we are. Here we are. And we actually have like a huge post about the future of raiding to dig into this week, which is cool. Live game been a bit quiet out, but it is Plunderstorm week. So that seems to be, well, Plunderstorm, it started this week. It goes on for several more weeks, but that seems to be the big thing in the live game right now. And I haven't actually played it at all. So I think I'm out on it this round.
You're just
I don't
done?
know. I think so.
Maybe. There's no way you're out on it this round. Okay. So yeah, so a couple stumbles there at the top as we get our brains fired up, but Plunderstorm is this week and it's running for the next month. So there's definitely people who are going to be involved in doing that. And I definitely got into it and did a bunch of Plunderstorm. It's also raid testing week for PTR. So there's a lot of that happening too among different folks and what they're up to. So that's also happening around the game.
It's still, as we speak, I think it's still normal testing weekend, right?
It is.
So normal testing is still up as we're recording right now.
Yeah, our team's going to poke at it for a couple hours before our normal scheduled raid this evening. So I was on PTR earlier today, just getting my character set up, which took me 15 minutes, which I was thrilled about because, man, has that ever been an arduous process in the past. For those who are curious how to set up your character quickly, you log into the appropriate World of Warcraft account that you are wanting to associate with. So you download PTR. PTR was 5 gigs, so it was pretty small since you already had World of Warcraft installed. It pulls from a lot of the same files since it's all underneath the same file path. It's no longer separate folders for each thing that are separated out so much that they can't pull from each other. That was cleaned up a long time ago, which I'm very glad they did. So yeah, PTR was 5 gigs, and then I installed that. I booted it up. I copied over the character that I wanted, which was my druid, logged into that character once, logged out and closed that version of the game, went into the folders for World of Warcraft and copied my WTF and my interface folders. And I pasted those into my PTR, WTF, and interface folder areas and replaced the files that were in those so that it was accurate and tied, like basically the same as it was inside the live game folders that I had. Then I reopened both PTR and live game. And once I had both of them open at the same time, which you can do these individually if you want, you just want to use like Notepad or something else because you're going to be copying down a bunch of, export strings. So you're going to want to have that. But yeah, you can go into edit mode, export your UI from the live game, paste it as an import into PTR, and that will set all of your bars in your interface to what it's supposed to be, which is really nice. You can then go to your add-ons and do the same thing and export profiles from your add-ons, paste them into the PTR, and you'll have all of that lining up, copy any weak ores from one over to the other, and you end up with a very similar experience. The only thing I had to change individually, which I assume is just because there's some changes to file paths inside PTR from the live game, was I don't have turn left and turn right as bound for A&D. Mine's actually strafe left and strafe right. I've just replaced those bindings because I never want to just character turn by pressing those keys. That's never useful for me. So
also, like, those are the strafe keys in basically every other PC game since like Wolf 3D, probably.
Yeah, a long
like
time.
That's sort of how we control PC games, like traditionally. So I changed that in November 2004 and never looked back.
So I still have to change that. I still had to set up one bag. So basically just, type bag into the search inside the interface and then click on combine bags. And then you have your one bag set up the way that you want it to be. And then my camera, I always have my camera set to never touch my camera. Just let me put it where I want to put it. And so that I also had to change. But otherwise, everything else was fine as far as settings went. And so I'm good to go on that. I just have to go through spec stuff instead of spec stuff. But yeah, then my PTR character will be set to go. There's going to be testing this evening that we're doing. So I need to be sure that I'm ready for that as much as I can be with all the revamps that are happening to Druid and whatnot. And then, who knows, maybe I'll do some Mythic Plus on PTR or something else. So I just copied over my Voodoo, which is my bars, my frames, my raid frames I use Voodoo for the profiles for all the profiles that I wanted for PTR. So I have like a flexible raid one, a mythic raid one, a mythic plus one, and then like just a general one. And I have that for Boomkin and Resto. So I just copied all that over and set all that up. So that's all set to go. So yeah, I'm all set on PTR stuff, which will be exciting. But Plunderstorm was the thing that occupied about 5 to 7 hours of my time this week, as far as gaming goes. And I say that
it sounds very specific,
it does,
like a very specific window of time.
A window of time. Yeah. Weird. It's exactly the amount of time I needed to get all of the rewards that I didn't have for this go around. Yeah, it was pretty wonderful, actually, to be honest. I hopped in with Josh, aka Lore, and played for probably 2.5, 3 hours with him. And we had a lot of fun, and we won a couple of times, and it was great. I definitely enjoyed doing Plunderstorm with other people. And then the next day I was like, I should probably just finish it. Like I should just put the effort in so it's off my list and tucked away. I don't have to think about it again, because I'm not someone who's like thrilled with Plunderstorm. It's not the thing that I crave to play. There's so many other things I really want to spend my time doing. Plunderstorm just isn't very high up the list. So I went in and I grinded it out, and that took me another few hours, and then I had all the new mounts and all the new transmog and everything else, and I was just done. So like it came out last week, I finished the reward track last week, and I'm good. And it's like, great, that's exactly how I wanted this to work. I did not want to go, hey, this is something I'm gonna have to put time into every week for the next 4 weeks to try and get everything accomplished. I wanted to be able to just get in there and finish all the reward track, and then be like, hey, if I want to play some other time, maybe some other friends are playing it and they want me to come along, then I'll hop in and I'll play. There's nothing wrong with that. And I won't have any pressure about like, oh no, I need to get a certain amount of plunder, or I have to play a certain way to try and get out of there with the most efficient currency. Or remember when people were going, hey, as soon as I get 1500 plunder, I just run into the storm and die, because I might as well just queue again because there's not that much plunder left on the map. Like those sorts of things are no longer a priority or effect on my gameplay, which I enjoy that I've now moved past that by getting all the rewards. I know people who did not participate during the first season who are now like, oh man, I've got a lot of rewards to get. And they do. However, again, the reward track is fast enough now that I actually think if you played 4 or 5 hours a week for the 4 weeks, you'd probably be able to buy everything from season 1 and season 2 within that time frame pretty easily. As far as affording that goes. And it might still be the most efficient thing to get 1500 and then jump into the storm, but it depends on how you want to play the game and what you want to do. I know people who have won the game without having a single kill because the last person alive other than them died to the storm, and they ended up being able to get out of there with 3000 or 3500 plunder, and that helped them out along their path. So I think Plunderstorm is, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in the show with the official post, but I think it's in a good space. I think it's doing what it needs to do for the next month, and I'm pretty pleased with the overall rollout of this thing.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they really they leaned into a lot of the stuff that we wanted them to change, at least around this show, for if they brought it back. Initially, the plunder yield was so low when the mode first initially launched, and then they cranked it up as time went on. Then it felt pretty good. But it was, it was a renowned track, and you had to get X amount of plunder to get to a rank, and you get bonus plunder for your first game of the day, but then you could only get like whatever the thing was at that renown rank. So yeah, just making it a vendor, and like, oh, you collect plunder in the game, and then you spend it on whatever it is that you want to get, whatever you want to go after, target. Like, that's awesome. I'm seeing some people going, oh, well, there's actually too much plunder, and we're getting this stuff too fast, and like, what else are you going to do? And I think that that's just wrong.
It's just wrong. It is
Like,
it is the wrong opinion.
You could have like a leaderboard or something, I guess, for people who like care about the competitive aspect, but it's like a lot of people just want a little distraction, hop in, collect some stuff, and not worry too much about like, oh, I have to grind this mode, which is really what the first iteration kind of felt like, especially early on. And there are people who just like, even if there weren't any rewards, would just be in there playing games because they like the mode.
Yeah.
And that's great too. And I don't think there needs to be like a third thing that we're appealing to. We don't need to make people grind it because it's a thing in World of Warcraft. Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
It is a tricky thing because the audience of World of Warcraft is so in tune with whenever I'm doing something, I should also be accomplishing something else at the same time. They're so locked into that, which I get. Like, I have a massive draw to be like, oh, well, what do I want to play today? Well, what battle pass have I not finished yet? I should play that game. Like, that's where my brain goes a lot of the time when I'm thinking about what I want to play or how I want to spend my time, because I then know, hey, I'm enjoying this experience and I'm earning this extra thing. And I understand people wanting to have that feeling. I just don't want it to be a situation where the players, because the World of Warcraft has gotten a lot of collectors. That's the majority of the player base is I want to collect things and have things. I don't want the players who do not enjoy Plunderstorm to have to be in Plunderstorm any longer than they absolutely have to be, because
right, and neither do they.
it ruins the experience for everyone. Like, remember, like having people in the first go around in Plunderstorm who didn't want to be there meant two things. One, people just ran themselves into the storm and were like, whatever, I don't care, let's just go again. So you'd have matches where you queue in and there'd be, 50 people inside the match. And then within 10 minutes, well, let's say 5 minutes, there'd be like 12 left. And you're like, well, why did that happen? Well, not because of fights. It's just because people ran into the storm as soon as they got 1,000 or 1,500 plunder.
Right.
And just queued again. Yeah. And then did it again, queued it again. And like, that's what they would do. And so it's like, okay, well, we don't want that, because that then makes the whole experience less fun for everyone, because you're running around Plunderstorm with no one around in this giant circle because everyone has just run into the storm. There's only 10 of you left. And so that's not a fun experience. And not only that, but all the plunder they've gathered is now in the storm, so you can't get it, which means that there's even less of an advantage for being in the game late, because the people who you are taking out aren't going to have enough plunder to really make it worthwhile being there. So like, that wasn't a good experience. It wasn't a good experience for the people on the other side who were like, man, I don't want to be playing this game. I don't want to be here at all, but I'm here because I just want to get the thing from this as a reward. So yeah, I think they've hit it in a much better space. I think people who wish that there were more rewards, I understand. I fully understand wishing that there were more rewards involved in anything that's happening, because hey, that's cool. Like, it'd be neat to have them. But I think the pace they figured out of, hey, this should be 5 to 7 or 8 hours of gameplay experience that people need to put in sometime over the next 4 weeks is the right spot to hit for a game mode like this. Because there's very few people, I think, who could complain about being like, yeah, I need to spend like an hour and a half a week sort of just looking at this game mode. And you're like, yeah, and then you just finish it and you're done and you have all the rewards. That's not too hard to squeeze in over a week. Whereas I think 3 to 5 hours a week would be extreme. That's like, hey, well, you could choose to raid, or you could get your Plunderstorm rewards for the month. And you're like, well, that's crappy.
Yeah.
It
was also the thing of, as the event kind of went on, if you weren't putting the time into it, but you wanted to get all the stuff out of the old Renown track, it's like, okay, I have to play 3 games every day.
Yeah.
Until the end of this event. And then I will get to the end of it where, like, that adds up pretty quick, I mean, I was sort of in that spot. I played a little bit when it came out. I'm like, this really isn't for me, and it doesn't feel very rewarding. And then they buffed it. And I'm like, okay, the rewards feel good now. I want to finish the Renown track.
Yeah.
And I thought the mode was okay, but yeah, like, by the end of that, I was kind of in a spot where I had to get my dailies in, and I had to make sure I was playing, on a daily reset kind of basis. And every time I'd queue into the game, the lobby, it was nothing but people complaining about having to play the game. They didn't want to play the mode, and then, yeah, people would just complete their quest and, suicide into the storm. And then, yeah, the round ends up being like, 12 people actually playing, and everybody else just noping out as soon as they could possibly get that, like, that highest efficiency yield of plunder and then get out. So I definitely experienced that, although I had weirdly like made peace with the game mode by then. I was like, okay, whatever, let's play some games.
There definitely
but
was a conceding that happened for me mentally, where I was like, all right,
Mhm.
whatever, just keep queuing. I don't care if I die quickly, whatever, just keep queuing. Like I definitely had conceded by that point in season 1. So and I had really good games. I won a lot of matches, and I definitely started to figure out a lot of builds and things that I thought were really fun to do. And again, this go around, it was a similar thing where the first 10 matches I played was, dying quickly or making it really late in the game, but then not really having a very good build compared to other people and sort of having to figure some stuff out. And there's some really new, cool new abilities in there. We'll talk about those again with the post a little bit later on. So I think there's a lot. It's hit the right mark for me. So I'm pleased with it. We'll tuck Plunderstorm away until we get to the post later in the show, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we did this past week in WoW. Turbulent Timeways is still going on. I hopped in there on my rogue this time because my blacksmith is now who's my Death Knight is now max level. So I was like, all right, who's the next character who's going to be time-wasing so that I can get a profession up? And so my rogue is an engineer. That was the last profession I didn't have. So my rogue is 77 now after doing some Turbulent Timeways. I actually ran them with Mistledine, which is was fun to do. And we got that done really quick. It's super crazy experience. Coming out of that with that buff is even nicer. And then, of course, actually, if you're leveling up a profession, it's really fast just to level up your... You'll get 3 or 4 levels just like getting to 50 skill points on your... I don't mean knowledge, but skill points on your profession. You'll get a couple of levels just doing that, which is really nice. So you can get a character boosted up pretty quick. I'm going to leave the rogue at 77 until next week. Do Turbulent Timeways next week on the rogue. That should max that rogue out, and he'll be done. And I'll be 3 weeks done on Turbulent Timeways towards the 5 weeks mount reward from the Feat of Strength. So that's going to be exciting to get done. But I will say, like, I feel like I definitely missed out a bit during Anniversary event at how effective time walking is to level. And during the Anniversary event, obviously there was a much larger experience buff than the 30% we get for Turbulent Timeways, and it would have been crazy fast to level characters that way. And it wasn't on my radar. It wasn't something I really wanted to do. Time walking to me always feels a little bit lower down the list. The main reason why I'm doing time walking right now at all is because I want to get the Feat of Strength mount from all of that. So that's what's keeping me on that path and motivated to do it. But I definitely recognize, like, if I was going to level characters, this is a really great way to level characters. You do still run into the problem of I am max level and now don't have access to gear of relevant to, Dornogal max, not max level. Sorry, I'm close. Well, I guess at max level you have access to more things. Sorry, I'm in my 70s and I still don't have access to gear because every green on the auction house costs 15k. But as soon as you hit max level, you actually have access to a lot of stuff. So that's not so bad at that point. But at level 77, when I was trying to do profession stuff, there was a lot of item level 247 gear that my rogue was wearing as they rolled around on stuff. And then you'd be like, hey, a world quest is up. Okay, I'm going to go like use all my cooldowns to try and kill this thing in this world quest so I can get an item level 528 piece versus the 247 that I'm wearing, because that's the item level difference between what I was given as a character who got their catch-up mechanic given to them and then went into time walking versus a character who, actually leveled up, progressively and is only 50 or 60 item levels behind. I'm actually like 300 item levels behind where I should be and can't afford to buy anything. So it's a weird situation to end up in on characters, but I've consistently ended up in this situation on multiple characters, which makes me think that, okay, it would be nice if there was like item level 480 or 490 gear that was just on a vendor inside Dornogal that you could go and buy, because it would just at least get you to that, hey, this is like leveling gear for Dornogal. Don't go back to Dragonflight and gather a bunch of gear because it feels like a big waste of time. Here's just a bunch of stuff off of a generic vendor that you can just buy that is this. That would feel better to me than being in the situation. I will say going and checking the time walking vendors for gear is a really great way to gear your character throughout time walking events, because I was able to go there on my rogue at like 75 or 76 and just buy like a couple of swords because there was a sword that was on them. So I was like, all right, well, I'll play, outlaw so I can actually use swords. And then I picked up like 4 or 5 other pieces of gear. They don't have every slot, but 4 or 5 other pieces of gear. And they were like 25 or whatever badges a piece. So they weren't super expensive or anything. I could certainly afford them for the 500 I got for running one time walking dungeon, which then massively scooted my item level up in those spots, which was a big deal. But it does feel weird to be like queuing into time walking in your level 70s and being like, yeah, I have, gear that you'd find on a level 30 right now. So this is fun. Like, it's weird.
Right. Well, hey, that's a good thing about Turbulent Timeways right now is the different event vendors usually have different slots.
Yeah.
So as long as you hit them, in sequence, even if you're still leveling up and you're buying stuff you can't equip yet, I mean, they don't cost a lot of badges. So it's not great gear, but you could stash it. Then at least it's level 80 gear for one, once you're done leveling. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
I didn't end up doing any Turbulent Timeways so far because it is great for leveling.
Yeah,
100%. It's not really great for much else, in my opinion.
Well, you get a heroic piece, right?
It's a heroic piece. Yeah, that's also cool if you're trying to gear up a new tune. I'm not trying to do any of that really, right? Like I have more 80s than I can manage right now, and like I do because like my Paladin and my Demon Hunter I haven't played hardly at all, and my DK is like 75 or 76 or something. But it's like, okay, if I get around to leveling her up, what am I going to do with her? If she's already third in line for whoever gets geared next, and then my 2 alts are basically full hero gear anyway.
Yeah.
So, it's amazing for leveling, but that's like the main benefit. I mean, you get that stacking XP buff and all. That's kind of the whole point of it, in my opinion, is to level up and gear out a tune up to that level. So it's just, I don't know. I haven't ended up doing any of it, and I'm not too keen on the B mount. If I don't get it, I don't get it. I'm probably just not going to do it because it's just not where my head's at right now in terms of how I'm spending my time. So I did end up in that position though. Like I leveled up so many tunes when War Within was new, and it's like I don't have time to maintain all of these. Like they're just going to be, I'll hand them off some Warbound stuff as I come across it, but like I don't actually have time to play them,
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, kind of a cool problem to have, but it's like, it's awesome to have like 5 max level characters this early in the expansion, but I don't play the game full time. I play a couple hours a night, a couple nights a week, basically, and I dink around during the day or whatever. So, it's beyond that. Beyond that, it's like it's too much time investment in a character to keep it relevant. So I can't do it. Like I don't even know what kind of item level my Demon Hunter is in. Like she's max level, and I leveled her up like traditionally, but it's like, okay, well now I got to start the gearing kind of process, and it's like, well, that's just literally not going to happen this season. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean, but I think it depends on what your objective is with those characters. Like if your goal is, hey, all of the characters that I have at max level, I want to get into hero gear so they're actually playable and rateable and whatever it is, right? Like that's a different objective than what I have. For example, I have 7 max level characters, but it's just professions. Like literally, I have my main character, I have a monk who's heroic geared, and then I have characters that are kind of like somewhere between heroic and normal geared characters, just from finding stuff for Warbound or whatever it is, from doing professions, because that's all they do. So I now have every profession in the game on a character that's max level so that I can actually do any of the crafting I want to do and actually learn a lot about the profession system, because I was so detached from the profession system inside Dragonflight. There was certainly a feeling of wanting to catch up, but there was also a feeling of like, how does this work? And you start to find really cool things that can be somewhat frustrating, but also are really cool. Like engineering, for example, you don't go out and buy recipes, and you don't go out and like train on a trainer or whatnot. You primarily do inventing, and you just invent and go, hey, okay, I invented this thing. And if you choose to use that thing, you then learn how to craft it. From your prototypes, you invent a prototype, you use the prototype, you learn how to craft it. Or you can just sift through scrap and experiment until you come up with something else that looks kind of cool. Or you can put together notes, like sort of scattered notes that you find together to come up with other neat, cool things. So you sort of get to like, I think it's level 50 as far as, you get to skill level 50. And at that point, you just kind of like, okay, everything from here on out is just, you have to find recipes by inventing and exploring and whatever it is. I think that's really neat as a concept for an engineer to be doing that. Now, it's kind of frustrating because it's harder to target things. So the way your knowledge points go, you spend them into an area, and once you've committed those knowledge points towards goggles, for example, now you're more likely to discover goggles when you're inventing things. So you can actually get those. And that's kind of the closest thing you can do to targeting it, as opposed to going, hey, I'm going to go to this vendor and just buy the profession recipe I want, or buy the whatever recipe it is that I want off this vendor, like you can for other professions. But I thought it was a neat twist. There's also some really cool stuff on engineers that I completely forgot about that we mentioned way early on when we were talking about this expansion, the potion grenades, where you're throwing potion grenades that gives 5 people inside that area a buff of a potion grenade or a heal. Like, those things are really neat. They have the emergency button, the big red button where you put it down before a pole and it's wipe recovery. Like, that's in there now. There's so many things that are in there for engineers that are just really neat things. And engineering's always had some pretty cool stuff, but it was neat to sort of stumble across that stuff when I was skilling that up. So that was really fun. Blacksmithing, I got a lot more skill ups on as well. And I will say, I noticed something that's starting to become a bit of a trend in professions, which is, hey, here's X profession. Let's say, here's a great example. Enchanting has the ability to shatter an essence, which will increase your multi-craft and ingenuity and resourcefulness, right? And you can actually talent into talent trees to make that shattering of an essence that much more impactful on your character. And you're like, cool, that's really neat. And there's a whole talent tree towards it, and it's dedicated towards it. And all I have to do is shatter an essence, and I have like thousands of some of these resources. And some are worth more than others, but I have one that I barely ever use, which is with the crystalline, whatever it is stuff. I just have tons of it. And so it's like, all right, I'm going to literally shatter one of those before I do any of my work orders or any crafting orders or anything like that, because I will then have a higher chance of resourcefulness and everything else kicking in, which is great. And I'm leveling blacksmithing. I'm going to go, oh, blacksmithing has the same thing. They literally have a tree that's dedicated knowledge point wise to spending points in, and then you're able to, essentially do a similar thing where you're shattering an essence kind of concept. In this case, you're like stoking the fires of a forge is their concept, and that will increase all these things. Except the enchanting one cost 1 essence that I had thousands of and is nothing. The blacksmithing one costs like 4 different materials, one of which is like the actual like resource you use to buy recipes and plans off of vendors and whatnot, and use to craft profession gear and higher end gear. And I was like, okay, this is exorbitantly more expensive. And there's limited uses. You can only craft a certain amount of these, and you have to wait for charges to recharge for you to be able to actually craft more of them. So you're kind of limited on how you do them. And it creates an item that sits in your inventory versus just giving you a buff. And I was like, well, I feel like the people who designed enchanting and the people who designed engineering both had the same cool idea. And then one went, here's a really easy way of doing it and implementing where people are going to use it on a regular basis. And then the other who did blacksmithing went, here's a really powerful thing, and I want it to be, something that people really value. So I'm going to make it difficult to craft and more punishing, and people have to really decide whether or not they want to use it. And you're like, why did you take 2 different paths? Like, it's a strange thing in game design where 2 things that do exactly the same thing, that both have knowledge trees that are like set up exactly the same, are that dramatically different between the 2 of them when it comes to cost to the player. And so I find it strange when I'm starting to find these parallels. There's other ones too, where you're like, oh, okay, this doesn't make sense. One of the hotfix notes that is later in the show that I wanted to mention, which I'll just mention now because it's easy because I'm on the topic. For tailoring, the intellect and stamina values given by Daybreak, Sunset, and Weaver spell thread in War Within has been adjusted to match the agility and strength stamina values given by their armor kit counterparts. So yeah, leatherworking, when they made armor kits, were giving players 950 of their primary stat and 895 stamina. But for tailoring and tailors, when they made their leg enchant, it's giving 747 primary stat and 230 stamina. Like 665 less stamina is a lot of stamina, and 200 less primary stat is a lot of primary stat. Why is it that leatherworking walked out of the door with essentially a substantially better leg enchant for all of your melee users who are agility and strength users? And why is it that intellect users got so ripped off with their spell thread? And it's a similar thing where you're like, okay, how is it that the design teams came up with this stuff and released with this when you're doing it's the exact same item. It goes in the exact same slot. it's a power-based thing for an enchanting thing. How does that make sense? And it's just a very strange thing where you're like, okay, I feel like I don't know how professions came out this way, but that's my profession rant that I want to get at the top of the show. But it seems very strange as I've sort of worked my way through all the professions to find things like this that are so parallel that you're clearly like, okay, I don't know which people designed these, but they didn't look at each other's work and didn't talk to each other, even though they're making the same thing for a different profession. It seemed very weird.
Well, that's why they're fixing it. It is weird though. You think you just dial in the same values essentially and go, here you go. But
yeah,
it might be, I don't know, might be different with the way different stats work or whatever. But yeah, it's kind of funny. Yeah, it's good they're fixing it though.
I'm glad they're fixing it. Yeah.
I mean, from my side, like, man, this was probably my lightest week of playing WoW since War Within launched. Our kind of just did the new Tuesday routine, which is like reset night. Okay, raid. We're gonna raid heroic 1, 2, 7, 8. Run out, reset, farm 1 through 4, and then call it a night. And then Wednesday, if people want to show up, we'll clean up heroic. So I did that. I've been bringing in the monk to clean up on Wednesday, which is nice because then the monk gets 2 hero choices in the vault, and I don't have to spend an additional hour or whatever doing vaults or delves. Or, well, not an hour, but
I know what you mean.
It ends up being you got to get keys and you got other stuff you got to do. So just kind of just streamlining all that stuff. We're not going to raid tonight. Sunday's usually a raid night for us, but there's nothing left to do. I don't have signups to do Mythic. I think we're probably done with Prague, which sucks because Nexus Princess was killable for us if we could have just kept people showing up and getting polls in and practicing. And it feels bad to have over 100 polls on something that never died, but it's just realistically, like, I don't think we're gonna suddenly have all these people who were getting polls in come back and look to pull the boss more. So I'm not officially like declaring it dead to the team, like we're never going to do this, don't even bother thinking about it, but it's like we'll see who signed up, we'll see who shows up.
Yeah, it's one of those bosses where having more gear and more damage helps only because it makes the fight shorter. It does not actually help with any of the mechanical issues. So it's
and if you're coming in with with 0 pulls under your belt and 12 people in the raid have 100 pulls under the belt, it's just it's incongruous and it's not really fair to anybody involved,
Right.
So it's a little dicey. We're probably done with it, but I'm keeping the door open in case people start trickling back in. Then we'll start, we'll start it back up. We got a few weeks here.
Yeah.
We do have to do achieves. We haven't done the raid achievements, but I usually like to do that at the very end of the season. So, that is the last kind of thing I have in mind that I have to get on the schedule for the group. Got into some keys this week, but not, we kind of had the conversation like, hey guys, are we good with like just doing 4 keys for the rest of the season instead of 8? Like, does anybody really need anything anymore? Like, I like hanging out with you all and doing dungeons. It's super fun, but I don't want to have to try to slam 8 dungeons into the week. And it's like, I have that kind of mentality where it's like, if I do a 5th dungeon, then I got to do 3 more, right? Because why did I do that 5th dungeon? Now I have to get that next vault slot unlocked for it to be worth it,
Right.
Which is not really true. It's kind of a stupid way to approach it, I guess. But I kind of like the idea of, okay, we're just going to do 2 raid nights, 2 keys after raid. See you next week until patch. Like, I think that's just the way it's going to be, The only other stuff I really did was I made sure I got my professions, skilled up for the week. I got my blacksmithing treasures in 3 treasures. I had to open 3 treasures, and I got my 2 blacksmithing points. I was on my way, just mining away until we got those skill ups. And Siren Isle, obviously, like keeping up to date with that, getting the item level upgrade for the ring, and getting the unlocks for the zone and all that. Doing the weekly stuff out there, like kind of that's remained a priority because it's direct power and it's also feature unlocks, and it doesn't really take very long. It's decently fun for what it is. It's like, I don't know, what am I out there, 30 minutes or an hour or whatever, and then it's like, okay, see you next week. And I guess this week, if you're caught up, this week is the last week of Siren Isle unlocks.
Yeah.
So that'll be max item level on the ring and also unlock flying on the island. So that's the reward for this week's weeklies out there. So I guess it's my last week of even doing that. But yeah, just keeping the team going, keeping guild stuff happening, and just really dialing it way down because season 2 is not that far off. It's the perfect time to just kind of take a step back, just play a little bit less, and because it's going to ramp up, and I want to have that time of like, okay, I'm going to do other stuff in my leisure time. I'm going to play other games. I'm going to just not attach myself to so many WoW commitments for a couple months here until we get into new stuff to do, and then we'll kind of reconfigure. So that's really where I'm at, and I feel good about it. I put a ton of time into this season, and I accomplished a ton. I mean, my main is pretty much completely maxed out. I have 2 pretty high item level alts that I feel good about. All the stuff that makes me want to log into the game, I feel like I've checked off the list, really. So I feel good about it. To me, it's not a bad thing. It's not there's nothing to do in .7. Siren Isle sucks. I wish I had more stuff to do. I need to log in and play. I'm like, no, dude, I don't need to do that. I played the shit out of this content. I'm ready to. I'm ready to just kind of put it in a box and put it on the shelf, and I'll see you for Undermine.
Yeah, I very much, this is part of why I wanted I expected the content to come faster for 11.1 was because I do feel like we're going to hit that point over the next 3 to 4 weeks where people are like, okay, I'm just kind of, that's it. There's nothing there. I raid log and that's it. And that's what we're doing. And I never like when the game gets to that point. I always wish there was something before that point happens. I'm also someone who is like, hey, I believe that people need a break and need some time off and need to be able to, accomplish that. I just don't feel like that break needs to be 8 weeks long. And I think we're going to hit that point. So it'll be an interesting experience for folks to see what happens with the player base over that. And we'll obviously notice that in our download numbers and everything else, because that seems to follow the same trend of people playing the game and interest in the game, which I think is kind of neat to see. So we'll see what happens with that. But I will say, I think Siren Isles is exactly what it needed to be as far as content goes. I'm very glad they changed it from the reason why this is going to remain relevant to you is because every week there's going to be a different faction and you have to farm the stuff for that different faction, and it became more of a chore. I'm glad they didn't do that. I think the way they have it set up is great. I just enjoyed yesterday going, hey, I'm just going to hop on my rogue and just run around underwater gathering chests because there's so much treasure in the water. You can just run around and gather. And inside of those is like transmog and pets and warbound gear and all sorts of stuff that's in there, which was great.
Yeah, pretty decent starter gear for a time walking level 2. Yeah. But yeah, you do get a bunch of warbound. It's not like amazing, but it's level 80. So yeah, that's another option too.
Yeah, so that was certainly something I enjoyed doing. And once flying comes in, it's gonna be much easier to earn that currency. And you need like 85,000 of the currency for the island to buy all of the stuff. So it is something where every time you're there doing stuff, you are earning a currency towards purchasing rewards, which I think is neat too. So I enjoy that. I think overall it's hit the mark of where it needs to be. It's a good catch-up area for people to sort of go into. It's not massively difficult. Even the storm, when you choose to go down and do the storm aspect to it, they're like, hey, do you want a giant mech suit while you do the storm? Hey, do you want a nuclear device you can drop on stuff while you do the storm? Like they've given you stuff to sort of help out and make it less arduous of a process of going into an area where it's all elites and really you should be with a group when you're doing this. They've made it accessible through putting in inventions and whatnot you can use to sort of allow players to do that, even if they're not very geared. So I'm pleased with it overall as a chunk of content. But yeah, I wanted to give a shout out top of the show to Bradley, because I missed Bradley inside the shout outs last week's episode. So Bradley, the shout outs for you. Thank you for being a patron and supporting the show. We appreciate you. And then, outside of that, I think we're good to move into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft. All right, it is Legion Time Walking Week that we're going to be entering into here, where the Sign of the Legion buff is up, where Legion reputation gains from combat and quests are increased by 50%, and you can access Time Walking versions of Blackrook Hold, Court of Stars, Darkheart Thicket, Eyes of Shara, Neltharion's Lair, and Vault of the Wardens. And this dungeons drop 554 eye-level loot for max-level characters, and the vendor sells 541 eye-level loot for max-level characters, but that vendor loot does scale with your level. So if you're level 77, you can buy 528 eye-level loot off of that vendor, which is pretty awesome. So that's a great way to get some loot for those characters as they level up through time walking. there's a quest, obviously, to complete 5 of these, but during the turbulent timeways, you don't get a normal piece of gear, you get a heroic piece of gear from Nerebar Palace, which is pretty awesome. If you are someone who is leveling a character, obviously they don't just hand you a piece of heroic gear, you need to be max level to complete this specific quest. However, there is another quest that you will get while you're leveling up, which does give you a epic piece of gear for your relevant level. And so you can get filled in some of those gaps as well, gear-wise, by just doing 5 of these a week on a character that you're leveling up. Also, during Turbulent Timeways, there is a stacking experience buff that you gain. Every time you do a dungeon, the first, second, and third dungeon will build you towards a higher experience buff, which when you complete the 4th is unlocked, and then you have that experience buff for 4 hours, and you can refresh it at any time by doing 1 time walking dungeon, and that is a 30% increased experience gain buff that is certainly worthwhile earning. And by completing 5 of these a week, or at least earning that buff a week, so it'd be 4 of these a week to earn the buff, you progress yourself towards completing the Feat of Strength, which gives you a mount if you do this for 5 weeks. And there's 8 total weeks, I believe, of time walking, so you can actually, if you've already missed a couple weeks, you're still good. You can just do 5 a week going forward and you'll be fine. You'll still earn yourself that mount if that's something you're wanting to do. The Delver's bonus event is going to be happening this week, which means the Sign of the Explorer buff is up for the Delver's Journey, increasing your progress gains by 25% for companion experience, and also your undercoin gains by an additional 25% if you're someone who wants to buy up a bunch of transmog or toys or pets. I know I bought the really expensive pet the other day, 10,000 undercoin pet the other day, just because I was like, hey, look, I have 10,000 undercoin. This thing costs that much. I'm just going to buy it because let's just have that checked off my list of rewards. There's still plenty more things I want to earn, but I do know that undercoin is going to be a currency through the entire expansion. And even if they continue to add more sort of loot rewards for it, I'm sure at some point I can just grind out the delves to do it. I do have a big question mark though, Jason, which is, hey, has anyone confirmed yet what happens to our bountiful cash coins? It's not coins, keys, when we roll into a new season? Because I get the feeling that they're probably going away, which means you might want to use them while you have them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we don't know right now. They haven't said either way. That would kind of stink because it's the same it's not, I mean, though I assume there'll be new sources of them in Undermine in the zone, but also the old sources will probably exist. So that would be kind of unfortunate if they rolled those over. Although you can also, once you get up the Renown track with delves, then you can buy 3 a week from Undercoin. So you could maybe just stock up on some Undercoin in case you need keys quick and easy when season 2 rolls. There is also like some catch-up gear for Undercoin as well. That's another source of low item level gear for a fresh tune. If you have access to that stuff, you have sufficient Undercoin, and that's how you want to use it. So I've spent like no currencies so far this expansion. Like the only stuff I've bought with Undercoin is a couple keys when I didn't feel like grinding them out on a tune that I was doing delves on, and that's about it. Like I haven't bought anything off of Sir Finley or whatever else they have over there. I haven't spent any Flame Blessed Iron on any of the cosmetics. Like I guess like I don't know what to do with it,
there's so many things.
I'll just like collect it, and then at some point I'll have enough of it that I don't have to think about what I'm spending it on. Like
how do you not have the Murloc floaty transmog yet, Jason? What are you doing?
Well, I got the wasn't it a trading post variant? There was a trading
but there's
post
multiple
one before,
colors. So... Look at the shelf behind you. There's all these different plushies with different colors.
Normally it's like I'm okay. I got like a version of the thing. I'm okay. I don't know. But if we're gonna be earning it all, I mean, they're not gonna reset our undercoin.
No,
so
I don't think they're gonna reset undercoin.
At some point I'll hit the vendor like the end of the expansion and go, oh, I guess let me just buy all this stuff.
Yeah.
I just don't, I don't think about it really, I guess, as I'm going through my daily and weekly kind of stuff. So my currency is just like sitting there for the most part. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff on those vendors that I don't even think about, and there is some gear from it too. So hey, if you're like a Delves player, if Delves is your thing, this is a great week to get in there and grind them up, man. Like if you're like a serious delver, then you've probably completed Delver's Journey a while ago. You probably have maxed out Bran, but that's a nice bonus to Undercoin. And there's all kinds like we're talking about, there's all kinds of stuff you could do with Undercoin. So, you can take advantage of that. This might be the week that I go back. Maybe this week I'll go back and actually I don't know if I have tier 11 unlocked. I might have to unlock tier 11 and maybe I'll actually, because that would be a good thing to do before the end of the season, as I'm thinking of
lots of achievements.
I have pretty much everything done from the season, but there is some stuff I didn't do. So this would be a great week to do it. It's just more bang for your buck. You just get more stuff for the same amount of time investment this week.
Absolutely. And it's part of why I was mentioning this week about the keys. If you're someone like myself who has 32 bountiful keys sitting on my main that I haven't used, and that obviously I don't gain anything from other than crafting materials and Undercoin, this is a great week to just go in and just run bountiful delves over and over and over again for, each day when they reset, to try and get as much Undercoin as possible and use up a bunch of those keys, because chances are you're not going to be carrying, I can't see them allowing you to carry keys over from one season to another, because otherwise you're just going to spam bountiful delves at the start of season 2 to get a whole bunch of loot that would then upgrade your current loot on that character. It seems weird to be we'll allow people to just bank this large amount of currency that allows them to just spam run bountiful delves to be able to accomplish this.
Yeah. Well, you only have what, the 2 a day, right?
3.
So is it
3 bountifuls a day?
Oh, it's 4. It's 4, and it's actually, well, it might be more. It might end up being 5, because if there's 1 per zone, right? Then there's the new zone.
It could have even more, yeah.
So it might be more, yeah. I don't know. Maybe they will. But they're also, they haven't put out anything official about it yet, but they are also reconfiguring the Delves reward structure as well. So that might have something to do with it. I have 50 plus keys, I think, on my main.
Yeah.
It would stink if they just kind of disappeared, but I'm sure if they're going to do anything with it, I'm sure they'll give us at least some kind of heads up. Probably not enough that I'm going to burn 50 keys before the end of the season.
The heads up I'd want. This is the heads up I'd want. I don't want them to go, we're getting rid of your keys, but we're converting them into Undercoin. So we're going to give you 200 Undercoin per key or something like that. I'd be like, oh, okay, great. How much can I actually earn of Undercoin for running a bountiful? If that is less than 200, then just keep all of my keys and I'll let them just cash that out. And I will then have a currency I can spend to buy toys and pets and transmog and all sorts of fun stuff. New attachments for my Delver's dirigible and all that kind of stuff, right? That to me would be cool. I'd be excited about that. If they're just going, hey, we're just going to get rid of them, yeah, I'd be very sad about that. If they're not getting rid of them at all, which is a possibility, it's absolutely a possibility. It's just one of those cases where I'm like, oh, well, I'll just bank keys so that when we hit the new thing, I can just grind out a bunch of these keys really quickly on my main character. And if there's any upgrades at all, then I'll gain from that. Or even on my alternate characters, if there's any upgrades at all, I'll gain from that. Even my new characters, because all those delve rewards would be higher. So why would you not, even now on a character that's, my rogue, for example, I'd be like, all right, I'm just going to bank keys, because the moment we hit season 2, I'm going to get essentially, if it's heroic or even normal, season 2 raid gear is massive as an upgrade, jump for doing delves, which would not be, I assume, a incredibly large difficulty jump for my character. So I think that's something to factor in. So we'll see what happens with it. I just wanted to raise it to people's radars while we were talking about it, so people can see.
An Undercoin conversion would be pretty good, because you're going to want to do stuff in season 2 that's going to award you new keys anyway. It's not like, oh, I'm done accruing keys. There's going to be new stuff to go do, and it's going to give you keys, and you're going to want to do it to progress your character in season 2. So I wouldn't be too upset if they were like, well, we're gonna cap you at 4 keys or 8 keys or something and convert the rest to Undercoin, or we're going to convert them all to Undercoin or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. Yeah. Just don't convert them to silver.
Yeah. Don't give me real gold unless it's a large amount of it, please, because everything's really expensive. So if you convert my keys into being like, we'll give you 30 gold a key, I'll be like, you are this is for
normally when they do that stuff, they convert it to 20 silver or something. If they were going to do a big gold conversion, then okay, fine. But what they typically do to
give me
cash is like, yeah, it's silver
2,500 gold a key, please, if you're going to do something like that.
There you go. Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, that would also be an option. I'll take that over 20 silver per key.
Exactly. All right. The other thing going on is it's a choose 1 week, which means you can choose between World Quest, Snuffling, Dungeons, Awakening the Machine, Severed Threads Pact, or Theater Troupe. There'll be 4 of those up as an option. Of those 6, 4 of those will be up. And you can pick which one you want to do. Obviously, Awakening the Machine is a double header, so you can essentially go, hey, I can pick up the Awakening Machine quest for the choose one. I can pick up the Awakening Machine quest for the weekly, and I can do them both at the same time and get twice the reward if that's something you want to do. You could also do Theater Troupe and go, hey, I'm going to run Theater Troupe this week anyways because there's a chance at a rare recipe, and it's just an easy, win towards my weekly vault if that's something I want to do for rewards. So I'll do Theater Troupe plus 2 World Quests. That gets both of those done at the same time on a character if that's something you wanted to do. Or you could do the dungeon one if the dungeon being offered lines up with a dungeon you're going to do in Mythic Plus, which is also super easy, where you go, hey, I'm going to run Dawnbreaker anyways. I'm going to pick the dungeon one and, get in there and essentially run a Dawnbreaker and it's done and out of the way. Or you can just pick World Quests, which is also super easy. You just complete 6 World Quests. You're in, you're out, you're done. Nothing to really worry about. So easy on that. Snuffling is still the most accessible of any of these, which is just digging up 5 disturbed earth piles and then discovering and collecting 45 of those, glowy azurite orbs, the world soul motes that are floating around in the air. You can do that pretty mindlessly without having to really face off and deal with a challenge. So that's certainly something that's also an option for folks if that's what they want to get into, depending on which ones are offered. Severed Threads Pact isn't so bad either. Severed Threads Pact, obviously something a lot of people want to do anyways. You want to sign your Severed Threads Pacts because you're going to want that extra gathering speed or whatever the other bonus is. For me, it's always gathering speed for all of my characters. And obviously you're going to be getting out there and you just have to kill 4 rare creatures and complete 5 packed rumors. This is clearly something that for people who have gear is less of an issue. Slaying 4 rare creatures doesn't tend to be that bad. The packed rumors can take more time, so this is more time involved, but it is something that is a way to support the Severed Threads Pact if that's a reputation you're still working on as well. So get out there, pick which ones you want, and hopefully you get through them nice and quick. Okay. The brawl for the week is Arathi Blizzard. This is Arathi Basin, but it's winter, which it is outside at the moment. Jason and I were just talking about storms that are rolling through our area. And so the blacksmith is surrounded by ice as opposed to water, and the air is so thick with snow, it is difficult to see anything too far out, which means you cannot see what's happening at the blacksmith from the lumber mill. So you'll need to work with communication with your team to be able to coordinate who's going where and watch for those quick pivots as people cross the ice. This is one of the first forays that Blizzard did into weather effects. So that's where this brawl originated from, and I'm really glad they did, because I really like a lot of the weather effects. It's always surprised me when it starts to rain in Dornegal. I'm like, that's awesome. I like that it's different. It's not always the same thing here. Although I would be totally comfortable if there were seasons in the game where that lined up with actual seasons, which they have for some mounts. That tree mount that we all got ages ago that we voted on getting actually changes its, leaves throughout the seasons so that you can actually see the different seasons. And there's, different pets and different fish that you can catch during different seasons, but the zones themselves don't change. It would be neat to see a zone that actually had winter. And so winter was, 3 or 4 months out of the year, you had snow and there was snow everywhere. And then spring came and you had like a thaw and more trees getting sort of leaves on it. And when fall came, all the leaves started to change color again. Like if they did that, that would be really amazing. So hopefully somewhere down the line, that's happening with one of the expansions that they're designing out there.
You know where that belongs? With the player housing system.
Okay.
I don't know how it works, but your player housing should have a dynamic seasons like Animal Crossing,
All right.
Arathi Blizzard is not as much fun in January.
I agree.
It's just not.
No,
you
want escapism. I get you.
Yeah, it's hitting too close to home at the moment. So yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's it's one of the less wacky brawls overall, and it's more fun when it rolls around in the summertime, I think. But yeah, that's what's in the queue this week if you're doing that. And this was like the first brawl we ever saw, right? I think so. It was either the first or second that we saw in the rotation back when brawls were a new concept.
Man, I feel like the Eye of the Storm one was one of the first ones too.
That might have been the first one that was live, maybe.
Yeah.
it's just like it mixes it up a bit, but it's not as drastic as some of the, in my opinion, more fun brawls. But that's out there this week if that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
To me, it's like middle of the road. Like I don't usually PvP anyway, but I'm definitely not gonna make it a point to go to my way and do this brawl, right? There's some that I might be like, yeah, like comp stomp, like, yeah, I'll do that this week. But Wrathy Blizzard, I'm probably out on that.
All right. The weekly world boss this week is Kordak, the Dormant Protector, the big construct in Aladorn. This is literally just outside of Dornogal. So your best bet this week, especially if you still have the, hey, I need to get, Titan Disc Fragments, is just hop out of Dornogal and wait by this giant robot for a group to pull it. Defeat it while you are not in a group, which means that you get the 50 additional Titan Fragments from accomplishing that, and it completes the world quest. Both things still need to be fixed. That should be completable inside of raid groups. Please, please, please fix these things at some point, so that we can actually, have those rewards for folks, because there's a good chance to get some 603 eye level loot, as well as obviously those fragments and whatnot that you need. So go knock out Kordak just outside of the base. It's also a world vault reward slot for killing the world boss. So if you're someone who's trying to get up enough slots to add sockets to your helm, your waist, or your bracers, it's an easy way to get, that world area filled up if you're someone who doesn't tend to run dungeons or raids. So you can get yourself some sockets for things. Mythic Plus is Voidbound this week, which means the Void Emissary spawns while players are in combat and buffs enemies. Any mob that gets buffed will take reduced damage. Killing the Emissary buffs players for versatility and cooldown reduction for 30 seconds. This is massive. This is the fun week that Jason and I always talk about. Voidbound is the week for doing Mythic Plus if you want to have a really good time. This ad will spawn. It is not difficult to kill. You get a huge buff. The versatility is both noticeable on damage as well as on the actual damage reduction. You can feel players taking less damage as a healer, which is great. And that 30% cooldown reduction is amazing because it not only affects people's DPS abilities, it also affects things like interrupts and things like your dispels, which means that essentially you can dispel much easier. Your interrupts are up more often. It just makes Mythic Plus more fun. So I would certainly say this is a great week if you're trying to actually push some keys and get up there. Enjoy your Voidbound. It is certainly a great way to get into it.
Yeah, agreed. This is the best affix in the pool, I think, of the Zalatas bargains. It puts one extra plate out in the battlefield, but it's not too noisy. It's not too difficult to deal with. The first week it came around, it felt kind of chunky. It was like, man, this thing's alive a long time. I don't know how to deal with this. As we've kind of scaled up, it hasn't scaled up as much as we have, so it dies really fast. Plus, it has no health, right? It has one hit point, literally, so it's all just shield. So you can touch a death it, you can execute it or whatever, hit it with any of those low health kind of effects right off the bat.
Yeah, if you're an evoker, it just has a shield, so you even have more damage against shields. You can spec into that this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good call. It's just, it has a giant shield on it and no health, so you can hit it with any kind of shield breakers or low health abilities. Yeah, just blow it up, get that huge buff, and keep rolling. I love it. It's so much easier to deal with than what we had last week with Oblivion, where you're constantly getting repositioned or whatever. I mean, I think I mentioned it and set myself up for tragedy on the show last week because I was talking about first boss in an easy dungeon like Mists of Tyrannosaith, and that exactly happened to us this week. We had a bad set of spawns where they were hitting the tree while we were moving out of Tears of the Forest and all the blue anima patches all over the ground. The tree soaked up a bunch of the orbs because we couldn't get anywhere near it.
Yep.
And then the spirit bolt from the Drust dude just started nuking people, hitting for 5 million a cast with all the buffs. So, that is very frustrating. That situation will not happen to you this week. The Voidbound Emissary ad does have an aggro table, and it is tauntable. So the tank can taunt it. If it spawns in a weird spot, the tank can taunt it over. Everybody can just blow it up. It's a nice design. The buff feels very impactful. It should be a great week for keys. And yeah, if you're still chasing some stuff for the season, this is a great week to put some time in.
Yeah. All right, micro holiday happening this week is the Call of the Scarab. It kicks off on the 21st and runs until the 23rd, and it's just celebrating the Scarab Gong being run back in the day for the opening of the gates of Encourage. And so there's some quests and there's some elites and there's some cultists and whatnot that you can get out there and turn in and complete. And as you do, you build a running score for your faction, and the highest scoring faction at the end of the event per region will win and essentially have their faction banners run and hung over the gates of Encourage for the year. So if you're really feeling about faction pride, that's certainly something you can hop into. If you're someone who's like, hey, I'm leveling a character and I want something a little bit more dynamic to do than, time walking or current leveling, you can go back and do these. There's still experience from doing all these quests as well. If you're someone who's a big PvP, world PvP person, this is another great thing to do. Turning on war mode and going out to the Call of the Scarab event. There's a lot of people out there who are PvPing in world PvP. There's if you need to kill 500 goblins out in the world, you can actually get some of these achievements and things done as well during an event like this. So just keep that in mind as well. But yes, Call of the Scarab kicking off.
Yeah, no permanent character rewards or anything for this. Although whichever faction wins, you have your banners, all year, the entire year until next year's event per region, which is cool. But I don't know, man. In BFA, we were out there, at least because you had that hub that you had to go to. There's really nobody's ever there anymore. And also, this has been in the game a long time now, right? When was the first one? 2017, I want to say, was the first Call of the Scarab, because it was Legion when Micro Holidays came in. Now we've had Classic and SOD, and now we got Classic for we did AQ again once, and then in SOD, and then we're going to do it yet again as the Fresh reboot. Realm progresses. It's still cool, but the whole thing it's a little bit different now. The original AQ gates was such a unique thing, and now we kind of rerun them every few years, it seems like. So
yeah,
it's still a cool thing to commemorate in the game, and I like the idea that it's like a holiday that the characters of the game might celebrate. I like that element of it, but I don't think you're going to catch me in Silithus this week, man. I got to be honest.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I like that this is a thing. I like that it's something people can go and explore if they want to. I had enough of turning in bandages back in the day. I don't need to do it again. I'm happy doing just letting other people live that life if that's what they want to do. We also have the Lunar Festival kicking off on the 28th. So that's a week from Tuesday. But we want to give people a heads up now because that is another one that's going to have a lot of transmog. We don't know if there's going to be revamped versions of anything attached to that. So we'll wait to see if there's any announcements ahead of time. But in general, just be aware the 28th of Jan is your opportunity to do Lunarfest.
Yeah, we just got to get a little bit out in front of stuff like this since we've been recording on Sundays, right? We miss kind of the windows for official blogs and stuff. So keep an eye out for it. Probably won't see anything this week, but we might not have any details by the next time we record. But it is coming up. It is one of the longer running holidays. So keep an eye out for that. There has some really cool stuff like the dragon costume toys that you probably want to have on your radar if you never bought those. We don't know about new stuff, but also this is a good event for, I don't know, do people still do pacifist challenges and stuff where they level up without killing anything? This is a
Honoring
good event
elders.
for that. Yeah, because you get quest XP for each elder, and there's a ton of elders all over the game world. So something else to keep in mind, I guess. But yeah, kicking off not with reset this week, but next week's NA reset it'll be starting up.
Yeah. Okay, hot fixes. Man, okay, so we saw some hot fixes that were incredibly necessary. For hunters, they fixed an issue where Black Arrow was dealing more damage than intended. But more so, the Seabed Leviathan Citrine was triggering infinite times when bouncing off thorn-like effects. That's a little bit of a problem, guys. So yeah, you should not have your citrine proccing infinite times.
Sounds like a fun detected situation to me.
Geez, I don't know. It's crazy. So that one got fixed. They also fixed one where the Roaring Warcreen Citrine was activated by pet deaths rather than only player deaths as intended. So there was apparently some pet sacrifice going on that people were gaming the system on in this. So keep that in mind as well as they resolve that. Inside Renown, Chef Chum Platter and the Plank Master Bluebelly can now be tagged by more than one player. That's actually fantastic. I'm glad they did that. These are all shared things for a reason. So they got in there and helped that out. The drop rate of the Azeroth Mini King Mechagon has been increased from multiple sources around Mechagon. Apparently people were having trouble getting this mini. So they're helping that out. And I guess since they're doing one of the Mechagon dungeons as part of the new Mythic Plus, they were having a look at that island because they also made it so the vinyl for the Triumph of Gnomeregan now has a chance to drop from all rares in Mechagon if you've constructed the gramophone. So if you're someone who made a gramophone, you get yourself that soundtrack much easier as well. So just remember, check that out. Man, I remember farming all this stuff and it was brutal. So I'm like, all right.
I was going to say, like, every time they change stuff with the items that were part of the meta for Mechagon Island, I feel like on the show I lament how hard it was to, collect all this stuff and get that meta back then.
It took me 3 months to do that meta achievement.
It was a big, it was a big commitment. I'm going to take it in a bit of a different direction with my commentary this week.
All right.
The fact that they're still changing this stuff in 2025 completely proves our point about it, right? Like, there's still stuff about it that needs to change. Like, it was cool. I mean, the reward for it was really cool. It was worth doing. Like, most of it was pretty fun, but there were a couple elements of it that were just like, okay, is this thing here today?
Yes.
Is it in the right rotation? Is the one thing I need in this thing that could be one of three things here today as part of, like, oh, if these three things only spawn 2 days a week, but then only one of the three spawns today. Like,
it was, and then there was, oh, it's dead in my phase. Okay, let's start phase hopping to try and find the phase that it is alive in.
Yeah, it was, it was a lot, and it was. I think I did it. I don't know. I doubt that I did it during that patch. Right, that was 8.2 or whatever. I can't remember exactly, but I think I finished it up much later on in the expansion, and it's cool to have stuff that is a long tail commitment and it's going to live a long time. But man, like, they have continued to make hotfix changes to stuff on Mechagon Island for the, like the vinyls and the minis and the all the pieces of the collection meta out there years on. I mean, that patch came out in 2019. Yeah. And it's 2025 now, and they're still like, this is still a little too hard to get. Like, man, we really had to put some work in on that one back then.
Yes, we did. All right. Plunderstorm, the official blog post came out for it, so we wanted to just mention that. It started running on the 14th, and basically each match is 10 to 15 minutes long, has a 60 player match count, player per match count. So there's 60 players that drop in. Some changes this go around. You can now choose your drop location, at least an area, as opposed to sort of launching out and then flying and determining where you're going to go and choosing when you're going to drop. Basically, it now launches you out into a particular area that you select from a map, and then you land on that area, which I've heard mixed reviews about. Some people really like it because it lets them always target the area they want to start in. Other people are like, I kind of like the the like gameplay factor, the challenge factor of not necessarily getting your landing spot or seeing where other people are landing and then choosing your own as being one of those things. So
right.
I've heard some mixed reviews of this.
I always thought kind of the strategy in the first go around with like the landing spot was like, you want a good landing spot, but you also want an unpopulated one.
Yes.
I'd rather have a mediocre landing spot with nobody in it than a great one that has two other people there, And so like I said, I haven't played this round, but I wonder, do you end up in a lot more situations where you're on top of each other because there's a couple landing spots that are, just more dense with NPCs or whatever, because what you want to do is drop and PvE for the first 5 minutes, right, and level up and all that. So you don't want other players anywhere near you if you can possibly arrange that. And when it randomly assigned people sort of, subzones of the map to drop into, it made it a little easier to accomplish that, I feel like, versus everybody wants the ogre mound or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, at least they've used icons to represent the more densely populated popular areas versus the lesser ones versus the really sort of vacant spaces. So people can still kind of select an area that way. I like being able to consistently land an area and build a strategy towards that area and how I clear through it and what I'm doing with it. But I do acknowledge that, yeah, you did lose some strategy from randomly dropping into an area and having to essentially work your way through that area, figuring out what you're supposed to do. And yes, you can, inside this situation, have like 30 people drop in one spot if they really, everyone kind of clicked on the one area, right? Like that can happen now versus previously. It's not like as people lock in the area they want to drop into, some gray out as too many people have clicked on those areas. You could have 60 people all drop in the same place, technically, if they all chose the same spot to drop, and it would be a crazy free-for-all brawl. So it's a different experience, and that's one of the things that they've changed about it. As far as the backdrop goes, it still happens inside of Arathi Highlands. They haven't changed that, so it's the same location. Not a lot of it's been updated. They have created it so that the non-elite creatures there do respawn, which is an interesting thing. So you will have essentially more plunder that you can gain, because essentially once you've cleared out the mobs at a farm, you'll actually watch packs of those mobs start respawning, and you can clear them out again if that's something you want to do. So you can stay a little bit. Well, I guess there's just more opportunities for you to level up and gain plunder and whatnot, which I think is great to see. So that's been really nice as a change. The lobby itself, before you head into battle, there's now vendors there that you can go and buy any of the skills from. So you can actually play around in that. And on top of that, they've now added a practice mode you could also queue into, which is just that area where you essentially are able to buy up whatever you want to buy as far as skills go, and then practice and use those skills to sort of have some better knowledge of builds and whatnot you want to do with builds. So I really like that. The store itself has changed, obviously, because there wasn't a store before. It was a Renown system before. Now it's an actual store. You can actually queue into both the store and into Plunderstorm from within like live World of Warcraft. You don't necessarily have to go to the character select screen and choose mode and then choose Plunderstorm to be able to queue into it. From actual like the group finder in game, you can pull up Plunderstorm and queue from in game, which is pretty neat to do for folks. So that takes you over to that, or you can access the store.
That's a
and
huge
pull up.
upgrade.
Yeah,
I feel like from the way it was in season 1, because then you can just kind of bounce back and forth, hop into a game if you want to.
Yeah,
it's just way less of a lift, and it's not as you can just queue into a game if you want to play a game and then go do a world quest or whatever while you're waiting for your friend to duo with. That's a huge upgrade over the way it worked before.
Yeah, and the store itself is a big upgrade too. So the store itself is multiple pages that use your scroll wheel to sort of move through the pages. And on the left side are basically which book you're looking at of rewards inside of that. So they have mounts and hats and particular sets. So like Plunderer is a set that you can sort of scroll through and get the different pieces for. They have pets. They have a bunch of sort of guns, weapons, a bunch of things you can scroll through and pick up a bunch of rewards from, including all of the rewards from season 1. So if you're someone who didn't do any Plunderstorm before, you can still pick up all those rewards from season 1, including Tender. If you're someone who just wants Trader's Tender, there was Trader's Tender that you could redeem from season 1 that is still there. So you can actually, just hop in, play one round, get enough plunder to be able to buy some Tender, and now you've gotten some more Tender inside your live game if that's something you're wanting to do. So be sure you check that out as well. When it comes to the actual like in-game experience, they have still locked down the ability to move frames around. So you cannot move, enemy frames or anything like that. It's still difficult to sort of click on players from certain distances because they aren't sort of quote unquote in line of sight. So you can't actually like target them from far away in some cases. So they still have some limitations that they've kept in for folks. They did add in some new abilities. They have Aura of Zealotry, which is like very, very large concentration aura you put down where your melee attack now hits in a large sort of like wide sweeping attack for when you're doing your normal melee. So it's a very popular one. This one does a lot of damage. Not only are you taking ground damage from just standing inside the concentration aura when you're fighting someone, you're also getting hit very hard by their attacks. So this has been something that a lot of people have leaned into. Celestial Barrage is very cool. It's a super hyper long range attack. It probably reaches about 80 yards. And you basically charge this thing up. And the longer you charge it, the greater its range is. And when you release it, it basically drops like a Moonfire beam every 10 yards for like 80 yards if you've charged it fully. And so you can actually snipe people from really far away with this and do a bunch of damage to them. So a bunch of fun things have happened with that. On the utility side, they have Void Tear, which is a way of sort of placing a remembrance of where you were and then being able to return to that place. So you basically put down a Void Tear during a fight, or fighting people, walk away from where your Void Tear spot was, and then teleport back to it. If there are people near where your Void Tear spot is, it does slow them and do damage to them. So it's also something where you might just want to hit it during a fight and then just use it immediately or shortly after to sort of AoE the person who's meleeing you. And there's also Gale Feather, which is this large griffin you call in that basically works as a ring of peace, knocking people back a good distance when they try and approach it. So, and this one has a very large placement radius. So you can actually throw this thing out pretty far in front of you to try and get people knocked back towards you or to knock people around and disrupt them. So that's another thing that's there. They did some balance changes on some of the abilities in it, but in general, those were the big spell updates that they did. When it comes to spectating, though, they did update the spectator. I was very surprised with this. They gave you it's just more tools, more features that you can use. You can rotate around between people. You can look at people's loadouts. There's a bunch of stuff like that you can do. Now I know when you're actually just playing the live game, when you're actually in the game playing a match, when you have a teammate, on the left side of your screen, you can see all of the abilities and skills that your teammate's using, so it's easier to line things up for them. There was something like that in the first go around, but it was just a little bit cleaner inside this one. And then, yeah, outside of that, it's just lots of rewards for folks. So if you're someone who wants a bunch of rewards, it's certainly worthwhile picking up a whole bunch of rewards. I would still recommend looking at playing around with keybinds for this. The default keybinds in it are not great. I moved my melee attack to Q just because I wanted it inside an area where I was able to hit a key a lot more easily. So that was big for me. But yeah, there's some definite definite changes that should be made to keybinds if you're someone who wants to play this a little bit more competitively.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I understand in a way like why traditional WoW customization is not like available in terms of like the user experience inside Plunderstorm. Yeah. Because then it would become sort of that add-on arms race type of idea, or what, like if you could just do, you know, all that kind of stuff, I think that would kind of hamper the, I don't know, like the competitive integrity. The mode is not like, it's not super competitive to the point where there's like leaderboards or, you know, some kind of something like that, at least not at this point.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be fun, but part of it being fun is it should be a level playing field. It should be fair, right? But having ways to customize, you know, your keybind loadouts and stuff, and, you know, being able to use your abilities optimally for your play style, that being able to do that and being able to do it on the fly is, I think it's important in the mode, because it is, you know, it's a literal kind of race against the clock, right? And also, like, you might have other players breathing down your neck or whatever. So making it easy to tell, like, okay, what abilities are in play here? What buttons do I like to have them on? Switching stuff around. All that stuff is great. And it's sort of like, when it comes to that stuff, it sort of replaces the need to have, you know, so much UI replacement or whatever that we might be used to in other modes. So I think that's, it makes sense to me. Like they want the experience to be the same basically for all players, right? Like they don't want that kind of variance there.
Yeah.
So, you know, that, and again, I haven't played the new round, so I don't know like what the updates are looking like, but I did feel like they did a pretty good job with the initial implementation of just making it so you could switch your abilities around or whatever, you know. It was okay. And it was like, okay, well, I can put this here and I can put that there. I'm going to drop this. I'm going to pick this up and upgrade this or whatever. So
it's definitely still clunky. I will say picking up skills and trading out skills and whatnot still feels clunky, often requires multiple clicks, can be a little frustrating at times. So that, like, that element in UI still needs some responsiveness work. It is something where when you walk up to an ability now on the left side of your screen, if there's like a pile of abilities because someone died or whatever it was, they roll on the left side of your screen, it will list all of the abilities that you're standing near, which is super helpful. So if things are overlaid on top of each other, so you can't see them as clearly, it does do that now. However, if you are wanting to right click and you mouse over an ability, it will tell you a left click will replace this ability, a right click will replace that ability. And oftentimes I find when I want to do a left click to replace something, I have to click multiple times for it to actually go, oh, right, sure, yeah, we'll swap that for you, which is irritating in a time is, you know, an element kind of thing. And you're sitting exposed, standing over a corpse. It's not great.
You're like,
in that
please just let me
situation.
choose this ability. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, because you have those moments where you come across a place where a fight happened and nobody made it out alive or something,
Yep.
and there's just stuff all over the ground,
Yep.
and it's hard to parse out at a glance, even with the different icons or whatever. So that's cool. That's a nice addition.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think overall, the folks who want to hop in there and get some rewards will be able to do so. Like I said, it takes 5 to 7 or 8 hours to sort of get all of the rewards for this go around. If you had completed the previous one, if you haven't completed the previous one, you're probably looking to put more closer to like 5 hours a week into this at least to sort of get all of the rewards if you want everything overall. But it's still very doable. It's around for another 3 more weeks, so certainly be sure that you're putting a little bit of effort in if you want to. At least pick up the stuff you want to pick up because it's all available. So certainly take advantage while you can. Okay. War Within Undermined development notes. Now, I've already mentioned the intellect and stamina values for Daybreak, Sunset, and Weavercloth Spell Thread being adjusted to match their leatherworking counterparts. So that's great. That was one of the big things for this. The other thing they do is they now have the Season 2 Delver's Journey rewards are available for testing. And the following delves, Excavation Site 9, Kriegwald's Rest, and Waterworks are now also available for testing. So you can check those out as well if that's something you're interested in. They have acknowledged that there's some improvements that need to happen to Drive, the new driving around system. And so they are looking into those improvements and are going to post some notes. So we should expect some notes at some point when they have and have resolved that as well. They did make the Singing Citrine's heal effect reduced by 33% for damage dealers and tank specializations. This happened because a raid team cleared Heroic Raid without a single healer in the raid. Everyone in the raid wore a healing Citrine, and they didn't require a single healer in the raid because everyone was healing each other so much that they never needed a healer. So that's why this happened. Just FYI, for if you're like, who ruined my fun? This is who ruined your fun. There was a raid team that went out, and when everyone wears healing gems, we're going into the raid and cleared the whole thing on heroic difficulty without ever needing a healer. So that, yeah, that's a reason that happened.
It kind of subverts game design in a significant way. Yeah. It's like, and we kind of talked about it before .7 even came in about how it's a fine line to walk because you want this ring and the Citrines to be powerful and cool, but they can't step on stuff and they can't live forever either. You want them to kind of be a bridge to the end of Season 1 rewards for people that are still working on stuff and like an on-ramp into Season 2 gearing. Yeah. But you got to be careful. I mean, this is, I guess for now, it's like, we'll see if they end up hot fixing it, but until patch, this change doesn't come in so far, but maybe they end up adjusting it. I don't know. And then, like you kind of expect that once we get into patch in Season 2 that your goal is going to be to replace this thing, right? Like you're going to use it up to a point, but you're not going to have it forever. So it kind of makes sense to start chipping away at it. I guess I would just say like, I'm not surprised, right? Like I figured that we're going to see changes to the Citrines and to the ring. I guess the Citrines are the ring essentially, right? Yeah. I figured we'd see changes to that, heading into the new season for sure. So it's definitely it's like a tightrope act, to try to keep it. You want to be cool for this window of time. You want it to be a bridge to the next season, but you don't want it to overpower anything.
Well, they specifically said they want the ring to be relevant in Season 2. So that I do know that we're not going to see massive nerfs to this stuff because it's not like they want us to replace our ring with, Mythic Plus gear or something like that from Season 2 unless it's like mythic level, because I think it's supposed to be relevant up through heroic content.
I think it's probably equivalent. I think they wanted to be in that kind of hero track range or something, or maybe if it's not quite, but it's the Citrines are good. I think it's something people will probably replace like mid-season if you're playing the highest level stuff. So it's tricky because you want it to be good, but again, you don't want to you don't want to have a situation where the wrong answer is to bring heal spec characters, right? Like, you can't have it operate like that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, 11.1 Raid Renown feature preview and context. So and this comes in from Skarzard, and it is a heck of a post. All right, they goes into great detail as to what the system's going to be. The notes we want to highlight about this is that they want there to be a renown system that you earn through killing bosses inside of the new raid that will progress you along and unlock a lot of really cool stuff. What they actually get into in this post is the context as to why they made this switch and what's going on with it. So Skarzard goes, "Hey folks, with the 11.1 PTR cycle going strong, we wanted to shed some light on a new feature that'll be coming alongside the new raid, Liberation of Undermine. In 11.1, will feature a new raid-only renown track aimed at providing a host of power increases over time, as well as some cosmetic rewards and improving quality of life for raiders. This renown is earned exclusively through completing the raid and is a big experiment on their end. So let's talk a bit about what we got here, why we're trying it, and what it actually entails. Raiders in War Within will be at least somewhat familiar with Nerubar Finery, a currency collected from defeating bosses in Nerubar Palace that can be turned in to gain a stacking warbound damage and healing increase. While we believe in our reasons for tackling this, namely to allow players to more easily meet their seasonal goals as time went on, as well as providing some extra value for those who enjoy raiding long-term but may want to try it on a variety of characters, we knew the implementation relying on currencies and quests wouldn't be perfect. In hindsight, it was a lot less perfect than we accounted for. With warbands being such a new feature, there were some pitfalls that led to bugs and overall confusion about how much finery one should have, how you are relative to intended seasonal progress, and so on. And what I think part of those bugs they talk about is like, hey, I can grab an alt and run an LFR and have like 80 finery coming out of, a 4-boss LFR and be like, I that's crazy. That is weeks upon weeks upon weeks of turn-ins. Like there was stuff with war mode with the war. My God, my brain just broke during the middle of this as I was reading this.
The warband.
Warband, thank you.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. There's stuff with the warband that did not actually go the way they wanted to. So despite this, we felt that the reception to its inclusion was positive and that it was adequately performing its purpose. Players gained power over time, allowing them to topple roadblocks that might have kept them stuck for long periods in previous seasons. And the cadence was quick enough that players felt motivated to continue clearing to see that progress play out. So when looking at how to iterate and improve based on feedback, we felt we needed something visible and already familiar to players that's also understood as a warband feature. And through that lens, Renown felt like the obvious next step as a possible forever home for this type of feature. Enter the Galagio Loyalty Rewards Club, which I love. Like it's played off Bellagio.
It's incredible.
Like it's great.
Yeah, it's so perfect for this whole patch, which is sort of a left turn for the kind of where we came in War Within, but I feel like leaning into it this hard is definitely the way to go.
Absolutely. So this 20-step Renown track aims to combine the aforementioned scaling raid buff alongside some staple comforts like raid skips and introduce some newer ones to see what works and what doesn't. In an ideal world, Raid Renown should achieve the following goals. It should supplement the storytelling and setting of the raid to improve immersion and flavor. It should easily communicate and telegraph what your efforts will yield over time. And it should improve the moment-to-moment experience of raiding, notably between encounters or during breaks. Finally, it should be accessible and forgiving for players who miss weeks of raiding or start midway through the season. I think that is great objectives for what we're looking at here. So this is a criteria through which we'll consider 11.1's Raid Renown a success or failure. And feedback on everything from the above goals to how long the track should be, time to complete, and what's available through it will help shape what it looks like in the future, and if there should be any future patches at all to its systems. Okay. Obtaining renown and cadence. Let's talk a bit about how players will obtain reputation and the proposed cadence in place to ensure a smooth progression over time. Like everything else covered in this post, things are subject to change, so feel free to ask questions or inquire if anything is unclear. As with the Severed Strands buff in Nerubar Palace, This Renown is fully warbound and is difficulty agnostic. It can be progressed on any character on any difficulty and be applied to different ones at a later date. Player who enters the raid will begin with Renown 1 unlocked, with a globally rising cap of 1 Renown per week, able to be earned from the raid. For example, this means that week 1 of the raid's opening will allow players to get to Renown 2, and no further, regardless of how many bosses will be killed. A player starting the raid for their first time on week 11, however, will be able to rapidly progress towards that cap before joining everyone at the 1 per week. So in other words, there's a catch-up mechanic, and the catch-up mechanic is, hey, every week the raid's out, it raises the cap that you can get to on Renown by 1. So if you join in on week 11, you can actually catch up to everyone else pretty quickly to be able to be at that point where it's the 1 a week as you work your way towards week 20 when the entire Renown system's completed. All right, a total of 5,000 reputation is presented within the raid, twice as much as is what's needed for you to earn your 1 Renown level for the week, and is obtained from killing bosses and named lieutenants enemies within the raid. We're trying this for a few reasons. Firstly, is to be less prescriptive on where players and how players spend their time in raid. Previously, players needed to full clear Nerebar Palace before they'd obtain enough currency to turn in for the week. This should allow for more flexibility and less time spent preparing if your goal is to obtain a buff to be used in that same week's progress. I agree entirely, because it makes much more sense, especially from a Mythic rating perspective, where you have a roster of 25, that if Mythic is all you're doing that week, you're not doing Heroics anymore, that this is a great way to ensure that players have multiple ways to earn that reputation if you are in fact sitting out, and you're not necessarily having to go and do alternate raids as often or for as long to be able to earn the reputation that you're wanting to get. So you don't have to go and run normals or heroics, whatever, on the side as much. You might only be in for 3 bosses, but you might be able to get enough reputation in those 3 bosses to be done your Renown for the week, which could be really nice for you. Okay.
I mean, it's also good to do the direction, because if you're, in a lower progressed team or you're doing a lower difficulty and you're stuck on that boss, well, if you could do a couple of the early bosses and you can do some of the lieutenants, like the mini bosses, you could probably get your Renown, for the week, and that might end up being a stack of the buff, and then off you go. I mean, being less prescriptive, I think, is a huge part of this. It's always been kill the final boss or kill the penultimate boss, and that's how you get like the big rewards for the raid, or get the raid skip quest or whatever. That really punishes teams that are on their way up or playing at lower difficulties, I feel like. And this system seems way more flexible. Like, as long as you're doing something in the raid somewhere, then you should be moving up the Renown track.
Well, it also means if you're progressing a later boss, you're more likely to earn that extra bit of damage for the week before you even arrive at that boss, which is also very nice. So you can figure that out as well in what you're doing. If you're not extending every week, but if you're actually like, hey, we're going to clear the first 5 and we're working on boss 6, you could probably earn your Renown in those first 5 before you even get to boss 6 for the week, and not have to worry about doing additional raiding to have the buff ahead of the raid time, which is also good. Secondly, we're hoping for this to be less punishing to groups and guilds that progress slower for various reasons. In season 1, if your group couldn't fully clear the raid, you are only creating more work for yourself in future weeks. This should ensure that groups both skipping to later bosses or stuck partway through the raid can still see progress for engaging as best they can without necessitating homework between raid nights. The reputation split is as follows. Boss 1 to 6 will provide 450 reputation each. The Mugsy, the head of security, boss 7, will give you 600, and the Chrome King Gallywix, the final boss of the raid, will provide 1,000. The 7 lieutenant enemies that are present throughout the raid in trash packs will provide 100 each, totaling 5,000 reputation total. So you can work out, or raid leaders can work out, how or what path they need to clear through the raid to get that reputation best for them, which is that 5,000 being double which you actually need to earn your Renown for a week, or it's 2 levels of Renown for people trying to catch up. And I don't know if this is per difficulty once a week. They haven't mentioned anything about that yet, which means you might be someone who, if you want to catch up, you could run LFR, you could run normal, you could run heroic, and then you're getting to your mythic. And that's something where maybe you can earn, I don't know, reputation per difficulty. They haven't mentioned it yet.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, the catch up there kind of, well, I mean, actually the next bullet is literally catch up specifics or TBD.
Yeah.
You know, if you're on track, if you're at the curve, then it, you know, obviously you're only going to get your weekly stuff, and it can come from any difficulty, but you're not going to get more of it once you get your, the rank that we're at for the week. But yeah, maybe it might just be that you get more renown from doing stuff if you're farther behind, and so like you don't have to go grind it up. That would be preferable, I think.
They do mention that in the next paragraph. So in the next paragraph, they go that catcher mechanics are TBD, as you mentioned, and they want it to be function fairly similarly to Newry and Finery did. And this is to say there'll be a sliding scale where players further behind will gain more reputation for kills, ensuring that they should rapidly approach the party with the global norm, likely the span of a few weeks is what they talk about here.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it for sure. Yeah. You don't want to
create work. I get you.
I don't want to say force, but that players will feel forced to like, oh, I'm behind. Let me run LFR on multiple characters because then I'll get more ranks. It's like you're just going to get what you get for the week. But they'll give you a higher yield because you missed prior weeks and you're catching up. Like, I think that's a great way to do it. I mean, just a quick side note, like we haven't seen it in a long time, but, and we kind of talked about this a couple episodes ago, like in the past we were accustomed to having a raid zone reputation, right? There was like a reputation faction tied to a raid zone, and you would get some rewards as you ranked up with it, but you really wanted to get exalted to get a particular piece of jewelry or something that would then be really powerful for that season.
Yeah.
That was just kind of the standard there for a couple years, and then they kind of stopped doing that. That was like very inflexible, right? Like you could go grind trash if there was like trash that granted it, or like mini boss or whatever, and you could do that.
Yep.
Right. It was very mindless and not very fun. Or like if you just weren't like in there raiding on a weekly basis, you'd just be super behind, and there wasn't like a catch up.
Yeah.
The rep was just it was just a rep grind that you had to do one way or the other. So if you're behind, maybe you find like a trash farming group and you just reset the instance over and over again until you get caught up to, the rest of your team or whatever. That was like the benefit of you could just do it if you put the time in. You could do it whenever you wanted to. But the game just like, I don't think it really works like that anymore. I don't think that's what players want. I think if they put in a system like that, people would just groan, man. That wouldn't feel good to do at all. Having this, like, if you're behind, it's probably a minor concern because you should get caught up pretty fast, and everybody should be in a pretty narrow band of progress with the raid rewards. So I think it's a huge upgrade over what we've had in the past, just conceptually, with this kind of like, character power reward for repeatedly doing a particular raid.
Yeah, so they even go into more specific of how they want this to be a future-proof sort of benefit for people. So they go, for players who are only interested in cosmetic rewards granted by this track, the Galagio Loyalty Club is intended to remain a functional track far into the future, thinking of something like Shadowpan Assault or Hydraxian Waterlords. And can be earned with an accelerated cadence by non-raiders in future patches and expansions. So if you're someone who wants to go back like an expansion or two from now and clear the raid regularly, you will earn reputation from one-shotting all the bosses that you're one-shotting and be able to get that. So it's not necessary to complete this track within this season or any sort of timer or to obtain mounts, toys, pets, etc. contained within that Renown track. So lastly, they're briefly going to go over the current placement of the effects of the Renown track as it is. And so at Renown 1, all profession tables, vendors, and crafting order specialists now exist at the Incontinental Hotel for use. I'd like to specify that it's called the Incontinental Hotel. But yes, you can now actually get all the crafting tables and profession vendors and stuff there, which is really nice. I like that travels with you to that hub. Renown track 2. Yeah, so FYI, you start at Renown 1. So like that will exist when the raid launches. You will have access to those things. Renown 2, you consume food 100% faster while inside Liberation of Undermine, and grants access to the busted rune dispenser and an object in the hotel which has a chance to grant an augmentation rune. So augmentation runes being something that still are really weird and expensive to acquire. They still cost like 1,700 to 2,000 gold a piece, and are minor in their actual benefit that you're gaining from them, which I think just speaks to them needing to like shower the servers with augmentation runes so that they cost 40 or 80 gold a piece, so people can actually use them every single pull if that's what they want to do, because otherwise it just doesn't make sense. So I'm glad to see this thing being there, because maybe it will actually help that process along a little bit. Or hey, even better, just let scribes craft them, which would be awesome too. So yeah.
Well, what you're supposed to do is run LFR and get them in bags, and then you auction them to people who are doing prog, and then you cash in. That's what they're actually for, I think, at the moment.
I don't know, man.
I don't even think about them until we get the permanent rune in the last tier. Right?
I literally at this point will do the profession orders so that I can just make 2,000 gold off of selling. Like, it's just, as a mythic raider, I don't even use them because it's just too exorbitantly expensive to use. Like, I have zero interest in doing that in something that literally could last 10 seconds in a pull, because we wipe in the first 10 seconds of a boss, because all the fights are currently designed where that can happen really easily. So it's just one of those, like, all right, well, let's actually not blow through all of the gold that I have on my account very quickly on augmentation runes.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't used them this expansion at all, but maybe this season, hey, if you from very early on you have a chance to get a free one a week, well, definitely use for like re-clears or whatever, where I don't think I'm going to die.
Yeah,
be better than what I've had this season.
Yep. Renown 3, the transmog and item upgrade vendors become available inside the hotel. Renown 4, you gain access to the Galagio Loyalty Rewards Club, which functions as a hearthstone for the Incontinental Hotel, and gain 3% damage and healing while inside the Liberation of Undermines. This is just 3 weeks in. I want to point out 3 weeks into the raid, because you start at Renown 1. So obviously you move to Renown 2 in week 1, and then you move to Renown 3 in week 2, and you move to Renown 4 in week 3. So that's when you get your first 3% damage and healing increase is going to be taking place. The rewards card has a 30-minute cooldown, and this is only usable while inside the Liberation of Undermine, and is intended to return you to the hub between bosses if you need for crafting, upgrades, etc. So they're also being like, hey, you don't have to hearth back to Dornogal to be able to do all this stuff. You can just go back to the hotel, get this all done. I assume there'll be a quick way to get back into the raid from the hotel, as far as back to where your progress point was with fast travel. So that'll be really nice as well. Renown 5, gain access to repair stations throughout the raid that also remove the sated debuffs, much like the temporal attendants in Mythic Plus. These are not intended to replace the value of engineer hammers, and will be placed sparsely in outdoor areas of the raid. So nice to have some repair spots throughout the raid, but also acknowledging that the bigger thing is removing the sated debuffs, which means that during trash, if they place these sparsely inside strategic areas, you could do things like, hey, let's heroism this pack and this big pull, and then everyone clear their debuffs, and then we'll do the next pull, same thing, heroism, and then everyone clear the debuffs. Like, you'd actually do that throughout the raid to sort of help us progress through trash faster, which is exciting. Renown 6, gain a 10% movement speed buff while inside the raid out of combat, and access to self-resurrection while out of combat. Turning on the self-res is to be determined, but we're presently targeting a 30-minute to 1 hour as its range for the cooldown, aimed at being a emergency wipe recovery tool. So no longer will shamans have to debate whether or not they should use their Ankh to do wipe recovery. Everyone inside the raid should be able to do a wipe recovery pretty frequently, which means all your healers can kind of rotate through who's doing it. Your DPS you can res could also do that, and then res a healer. So there's sort of building in wipe recovery in a much easier way as well with Renown 6. Renown 7, the damage and healing buffs improves to 6%. So this is now on week 6. So we're pretty far into the raid at this point. A lot of teams would have already cleared as far as the top end mythic groups, but the teams that are still sort of struggling with it now get their next 3% buff. Renown 8, raid skips unlocked after defeating the first boss. An NPC will fly in with a rocket you can use to skip to bosses 7 and 8. As raid skips were previously via quest and also per difficulty, placing this on the Renown track is one of the many things they're trying out. Even if you aren't Renown 8, you can use this NPC to travel within the raid depending on bosses defeated. Similar to the flight paths within Narrowbar Palace and other previous raids, the Renown is only necessary to skip ahead while those bosses are still alive. So, yep, this is another great change they're throwing in there. I like how that works. I like that people who are still catching up can use the transportation as well. Renown 9, 2 vendors outside of the Cauldron of Carnage. One of the raid's earlier bosses will sell you a miniaturized battle pets based on Torg and Florendo, the mech gorilla and mech dinosaur found within that encounter. So the bosses there you can get pets versions of, which is pretty awesome. Renown 10 is moves to a 9% buff for the raid. So that's actually accelerating a little bit. We're starting to see it's almost getting back to that every 2-week point. We're not there yet, but soon. Renown 11, out of combat move speed, moves to 20%, and you're now granted a counterfeit dealer's chip, which can be traded at the hotel for cosmetic appearances. Like in Dragonflight Season 4, one of the vendors will provide multiple colors of weapons for the Liberation of Undermine for purchase. So you get one of those coins at Renown 11. And a goblin inside, at Renown 12, a goblin inside the raid will provide you with Hot Sauce, a fire-breathing damage proc that scales in effectiveness based on your raid consumables. Profession consumables historically have an issue where they don't often scale throughout an expansion, so this is an attempt at making the value of well-fed flask, potion, and enhancement and enchantments stronger within a raid setting. So basically, if you get the Hot Sauce, you're going to have a fire-breathing proc that just does a whole bunch of damage, and I assume the more of these buffs you have on you, the stronger that damage is, because it's based on the effectiveness of your raid consumables. So that could be very cool.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
I love this idea.
Proc a bunch of damage.
Well, and it's something that we've talked about over the years too, where it's like, we don't get new food or flasks necessarily every season.
Yep.
And like, as your character gears up, it's just relatively, a smaller part of your overall power pie, if you think of it in that way,
Yep.
right? And so this gives them a way that's really tied directly into this raid content itself to maybe, smooth that out a little bit. I love the idea. We'll see what it feels like in practice, but it seems like a cool thing to play around with. I mean, they're definitely experimenting with a lot of stuff with this Renown track.
Yeah.
And I also really like the fact that they're doing things that are not just like raw power. It's like quality of life stuff inside the raid instance itself. I think that's also a really cool direction to explore, because we haven't really seen stuff like that at any kind of big scale over the years. So I dig that direction for that stuff. But something like this could be huge, because it could really, maybe we'll see in season 3 if they end up putting out new mats or new consumables. Sometimes they do that at the very end of an expansion, which is okay. But I feel like if this works out, it could be a lot better. You can just use all your familiar recipes, your familiar mats, and then you get a cool buff that's, it's tied more thematically into the content that you're playing. Plus, it would encourage people to actually make sure they have a food buff and make sure they're running a flask and make sure their gear is gemmed and enchanted and stuff, right?
Yep.
Like, as a raid leader, I appreciate that. Like, you want to reward people for showing up prepared and ready to play and, putting the work in outside of raid time to make their character be set up. So having something that reads that way, like, that's just going to, directly translate to more throughput on the meters for you. So what a great way to reinforce it. Like, hey, you should show up to raid actually like kitted out and prepared to play.
Yeah. Renown 13 is the next buff that raises up to 12%. The Renown 14 is the busted rune dispenser from Renown 2 is now fixed. It always grants an augment rune and has a chance to grant more or explode. One of the two. The Renown 15 is gain a second counterfeit dealer's chip for cosmetic appearances, and the 6th boss of the raid, the one-armed bandit, now has a small chance of dropping one as personal loot on future kills. So there's your way of farming additional ones of those appearances. Renown 16, damage and healing buff goes up to 15%. Renown 17, receive a puzzling cartel chip, which can be traded for a weapon, trinket, or otherwise special item from the Liberation of Undermine. Similar to Dragonflight Season 4's Boolean and Shadowland Season 4's Dinar, these are intended to have their own upgrade track, which will mean they'll scale to the maximum rank of 14 with given enough crests and valor stones. This could change before launch, but the intent is for these to be fully upgradable and usable by anyone that reaches this point, and not fully and not locked or conditioned to certain difficulties. So yeah, this is your bullion, your dinar coming back for you to actually help out. That's 16 weeks in, so this is pretty far into the raid at this point when you're thinking about it. So definitely keep that in mind. At Renown 18, out of combat movement speed increases to 30%, and auctioneers now become available within the hotel. I don't know necessarily how much that's going to help folks, but maybe if you need to buy potions or flasks or whatnot, you can do that there. You were at Renown 19, you receive a final puzzling cartel chip, and the damage buff goes up to 18%. And then at Renown 20, a purely cosmetic rank, players will obtain the High Roller title, a teleport to the raid's entrance, usable from anywhere, and at last access to the Furious Florendo mount, the robot mechasaur found within the Cauldron of the Carnage fight. So last but not least, they finish off with, we'll stick around and do our best to clarify any questions where appropriate. Thanks so much for reading. We're looking forward to your feedback and discussion on this topic. See you in Undermine. Man, what a system. What a crazy, crazy cool system. And FYI, this Renown 20 means it doesn't matter what difficulty you are doing this raid on, you will get a teleport to the raid's entrance and the mount just for finishing off the Renown track. So huge for players out there who want to get that.
I love it. It's incredible. For a team like mine, right? Like, we're still raiding again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, like, because it's a social thing. It's sort of an opportunity for people to bring in other characters. Maybe we have newer people to the group or recruits or whatever that we want to work out. So like, there's benefits to continuing to raid socially, but not as much in game. But with this, like, pretty much everybody's going to want to get Renown 20, right? Anybody who's like a regular raider, because it's so much cool stuff. The teleport's just cool, even if you end up never really using it. You know, the mount obviously is something that people are going to want. It's a robot mechasaur, dude. Everybody wants one of those in their collection, right? So I think it's also cool that the teleport, the mount, the pets are distributed through this system. It doesn't mean that others don't exist. I haven't looked. I don't know if they're like random drops from bosses or whatever for those kind of cosmetics, like for pets or what have you. But having ones you're going to get if you put the time in is great. The puzzling cartel chips, the dinar, the bullion, you could say like that comes in pretty late, and it certainly does, but like right now we are on the cusp of week 20 of Nerebar Palace starting up with resets this week, and there's still stuff that I wish I had, either had it all or had Myth Track, that I would be perfectly happy if I could get a dinar this week and use it to buy a thing and then use Gilded Crest to upgrade it to max. So I think there's going to be plenty of utility out of this. If it works like we've seen in previous season 4s, this also means that, like, take my team, for example, we got halfway through Mythic, right? There's stuff that people want from Silken Court or Ansarek that we're never going to get because we're never going to down those bosses. But you should be able to buy them from the vendor and get them to max item level for the season with enough crests. That is a huge benefit to all players, right? Like, if you're on like a kind of a middling progressed raid team, maybe you're AOTC and stop, or maybe even AOTC is kind of a struggle, but you are pretty into dungeons and you got a good dungeon squad and you have access to Gilded Crest, or you do delves. Like, you're gonna be able to get gildeds from delves now, right? On a more consistent basis. And so if you approach the game that way, if you stack them up, then you can get a really powerful raid item out of this, even if you're not doing the highest level difficulties. And I think that's fine. I think that's actually really good to reward players that way and their investment in the game.
I think it's good. I think it's important to recognize that this is probably going to happen. You're going to get your bullion like this with maybe 8 weeks to 12 weeks left before the next raid comes out, which means you're going to have a limited amount of lockouts at that point. But really getting those pieces is almost critical. Like getting a Spy Masters, for example, is critical for people even going into the next raid tier, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's okay. Am I going to replace this trinket before I enter the next raid on normal or heroic difficulty? No, you're not, which means it is a very important piece to have. So that's really where I think these dinar are kicking in, is yes, it allows people to complete off that transmog piece or get that cool item or get that powerful item and be able to use it in the raid a little bit before the raid sort of, rolls out of its relevance. But more importantly, you have it going into the next raid tier, which means that there isn't like a expansion release where your gear is so reset by the time you get to max level and are able to do stuff. It's a patch release, which means your gear is actually still quite relevant. If you're a mythic raider, you're typically almost wearing normal raid gear, if not better than normal raid gear, going into the next patch, which means that, hey, when you get these trinkets or weapons or whatever it is you're purchasing with your bullion, your dinar, this new token that they're adding, then you're essentially setting yourself up for having that slot taken care of for at least normal raid for the next patch that comes out. So I think that's kind of where I see the value in this more, because you're not going to get so much later in the system.
It's actually, but even that benefit that you're talking about, that's also huge for people playing at lower levels too, right? Like if you're on, say, a normal team or an AOTC team, but you're a really dedicated delver, and you could get like just a BIS trinket at max item level, like that's going to pay off huge dividends through the end of season 2 and that kind of on ramp that we're talking about, like with the ring and from season 1 to 2. This would be for season 2 into 3. So I think it's really cool. I liked when they used to do the old rep systems tied to raids, but they were really grindy and there was no catch up, and it was really punishing if you didn't have a regular outlet to raid with or whatever, you know? And if you were just trying to grind it to get it done, it was super mindless and not fun. And you could legitimately be behind people who had done the mindless, unfun grind and had the power.
Yeah.
That's just not a possibility here, right? Like nobody's going to be ahead of everybody else because they put more time in. Everybody has the same rank they can get to. The benefits look really cool. I love the design of this. And, like I said, I think for a team like mine where we're always raiding, we don't take breaks. Even if we cut down to one night a week, like we're going to convene that one night, we're going to hang out online and we're going to play the raid. There are huge benefits here for, a team like mine that maintains that scout. It's going to be so fun to go through and unlock all this stuff, have all these cool benefits. I'm sure there's going to be things that don't land and there's going to be stuff that needs to be tweaked. But if this ends up working out okay and becoming a new model for sort of, a reward system that launches alongside whatever happens inside a raid, it seems really exciting to me. It benefits my team's kind of play style in a very specific way. So when I first heard about this, we saw kind of some rumblings about it in data mining. I was like, that sounds really cool. And this explanation of it, it's like they obviously put a lot of brain power into how this was going to roll out and how they were going to approach it. And like the zone buff in Nerebar Palace is great, but the implementation was weird and it's hard to explain to somebody. And then if somebody in the raid has a question about how it works, it's like, well, we don't really know. You just get a bunch of finery and then you turn it in next week. Like, that it was a little weird. And it was also weird that the correct way to do it was to just like play alts that hadn't raided and get a ton of finery and then send it to your main. This is using stuff that's already familiar in a slightly different way. I think I have very high expectations for this. I think it's going to work out great. I think players are going to like it. And I think it's going to encourage people who maybe, maybe your gear grind kind of fell off or whatever. You got that stuff that you kind of wanted, or, you're not here to just farm the raid out. It might influence people to keep showing up through Renown 20, which then could, help a raid leader like me out who's like, hey guys, if we could just get some more pulls in on this next boss, we could probably kill it, right? Like, I don't know. I'm optimistic about it. I think it sounds really cool. And I don't really see much of a drawback for anybody except for people who want to gatekeep power and cosmetic rewards away from lower difficulty players. Like, if your mindset is that, like, I'm going to do high difficulty content, prestige content because I get this stuff and nobody else should have it unless you're doing this, then you probably hate this. But I think for most players, this is just a huge boon. This is a great system for everybody who wants to engage with the raid, as long as you're okay with people doing lower difficulty stuff, getting cool rewards, which they should. They're putting the time in, they're paying the money, give them a reason to log in.
Yeah, the only thing I can see them changing with this system, which will be entirely based off of player feedback and the pacing and everything they see with it, is whether or not it needs to be accelerated. It's one of those, like, should we have done this as a Renown 15 or a Renown 20? Should we have condensed this more? Like, I think that's what this is really going to be the feel out for. I'm very happy to see that the raid skip is on Renown 8, which is week 7 that we're inside the raid. I think that makes a lot of sense to put the raid skip there. So by the time you're, about 2 months into the raid, you're now able to essentially skip to the last 2 bosses. I think that makes a lot more sense for the raid as far as its placement. But something, a little bit later on, like the Dinar and how this, even the augment rune thing on week 13, like whether or not that's something where they're like, hey, we should actually aim for like a 14 week or a 15 week versus a 19 week or a 20 week kind of rollout of this Renown. I think will be something that they have to wait and see. But that's what I would think would be the majority of their feedback is this taking too long to get to this point is really what it comes down to.
Right. And it's like, in some ways, the idea is that it takes a bit longer to get to that point, right? Like they want people to continue to engage with the raid. So there is like a give and take there, because obviously like the players want everything as fast as they can get it. The devs want to extend the life of the content by giving you stuff to continue to chase. But yeah, I mean, the timing, it might be a little too wide there for some stuff.
We'll see.
It's a new idea. It's applying a relatively new I mean, we've only had Renown since Dragonflight, right? So it's still a relatively new concept within WoW, and now we're applying it into a different way to play the game, a different part of the game content. So yeah, I mean, I think stuff with timing and sort of the ramp up of the rewards is definitely going to be a thing they're going to pay attention to in terms of how players react to it. Like, do players just stop engaging after 15 weeks, regardless of what their rewards are or whatever? And is that maybe, that's maybe an idea that, okay, we need to condense this stuff. We will make it like a 16-week track to get all the coolest stuff. Maybe we see that kind of evolve over time.
Yeah.
I do like the raid skip where it is, because if you are, let's say you're killing like one new boss a week, then it lines up pretty well with an 8-boss raid, right? To then like, okay, we're going to just, hunker down and finish this raid off. Well, then you have the skip unlocked, so you don't have to re-clear if you don't want to.
And the skip is unlocked on every difficulty, which is the craziest thing about all of this. Is it's not, did we ever unlock the skip on normal? No, we actually didn't clear normal enough times to unlock the skip. We just moved to heroic,
we moved
right?
On, so
it's like that kind of thing doesn't happen, which I think is great to see. So yeah, I like a lot of the pacing initially. I know they'll have their eye on it. We'll have our eye on it, but as far as how it plays out in the future. All right, but with that, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. Today, I'm giving a special shout out to Alianas, Arajian, Bradley, Dustin, James, Kapawi, Cobra, Max, Shorel, and Rager. Thank you so much for all that you contribute, as well as all of our patrons, past and present. We appreciate you and what you give towards the show and helping support us and support keeping the show online and, all the archives online and access to it and spreading the love of the game. So thank you so much to all of our patrons. No new patrons this week, but if you're trying to find our Patreon, you can reach out and find it over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. Please do so on your computer and not your mobile device, because mobile devices like to add on extra fees that will just take money from you and not give it to us. So just keep that in mind if you're trying to support the show. It's better to do it through a web browser. And yeah, just patreon.com/thestartingzone, or you can go to thestartingzone.com and just hop on the link that's there over to the Patreon.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, patrons, for all your support over the years. We really appreciate you. We couldn't do it without you, and we literally mean that. Like, it's been a long time of us doing the show and running the Patreon, and we've accumulated a huge library of shows and keeping the show on track and in production and new episodes out to you, and keeping hundreds and hundreds of episodes online for you to listen to. It takes a lot, and we couldn't do without you. So thanks for chipping in and helping make the show the best that it can be.
Yeah. And if you folks have enjoyed this episode, another way to support the show is heading over to your iTunes, your Apple Podcasts, leaving us those 5-star reviews. They help out the show, and read them live here. This one comes in from Nadoon, entitled "Great Insight, Even for Us Casuals." I started listening to Spencer and Jason when I came back to World of Warcraft during Dragonflight. I used to be a semi-hardcore raider back in Wrath of the Lich King, but now spend my time in Warcraft playing very casually world content. I never touched Mythic Plus, but since listening, these guys discuss Mythic dungeons, raid tuning, class tuning, etc. Makes it feel not as intimidating. Their expertise and knowledge come through very well in a thoughtful delivery that has allowed me to feel confident enough to give Mythic a shot. Look forward to your podcast every week now when I'm not as active. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Nadine. I'm glad you are feeling like we are slowly opening the accessibility door into the Mythic Plus content, because it is a really fun chunk of content. It does give great rewards in the game, and it isn't crazy super difficult. Like if you're doing 2s and 3s, like they're accessible dungeons for you to get in there. And if you're doing normal raid, you can certainly do 4s and 5s. Like it's in that same range. So I would say that that certainly, if you have not given Mythic Plus a shot, don't let the word mythic be a bad word that keeps you out of trying the content. It is worthwhile trying out, and folks can get in there and give it a shot. And I'm so glad you enjoyed the show, and we can help out in your week. And thank you very much for the review.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time to write in and say hi. Appreciate you. And I guess welcome back. I mean, Dragonflight's been out for a while. So you've probably been back in for a little while now. But geez, that was a big break. If it was Wrath to Dragonflight, that's a long time. It's coming back to a whole different world, really. So glad to have you with us. And I mean, the biggest thing I would say, if you want to get into Mythic, honestly, is try to find a community. You know, if you have friends to run with, awesome. If you don't, check out something like Oasis WoW or Dungeon Dojo or something, and because that social experience and learning together and everybody having stakes with each other's success and having a common goal, I think that's really important. And I kind of take it for granted because I have a lot of really great, dungeon buds to play with from my raid team and my guild, and people are chill. Pugging just seems to get worse all the time, and it's something people have really complained about a lot this season. I've done it almost not at all. I think I pugged one person into a dungeon ever all season. So it's a different world, between people who don't have the kind of social stakes with each other versus people working together towards a common goal. So that's why I would really recommend there are communities out there that are built around guiding people into the system, helping connect people with similar goals and experience and skill levels. And so use those, man. Take a little time before you hop into the game to kind of set that up and find what's right for you. And then it pays huge dividends. Having chill people to do Mythic Plus with is one of my favorite parts about WoW. I think it's a great addition to the system or to the game. The system's a great addition to the game. So that would be my biggest recommendation if you want to get into it. Don't just go in, just completely fresh and just start trying to get into pugs, because it's going to be frustrating and unrewarding in a lot of ways. So
it certainly can
take that little
way.
prep time, just feel it out. Check out some Discords, check out some websites, some whatever, and maybe find a community home first and then start getting into some dungeons.
Yeah, I'll second Dungeon Dojo. I joined them a couple months ago, and they seem to have a pretty good organization going on and community going on that supports learning and cooperative stuff together. So I would certainly say Dungeon Dojo is one that's worth checking out. But yeah, I think in 2s and 3s, you're probably not going to run into too many people who are just really like out there mentally who are doing that kind of content.
Hopefully not. Yeah, but, I mean, it's pretty low stakes.
It is something where as you get farther up in the keystones, you are going to run into more people who have their goals, their objectives, and see other people as obstacles to achieving the things they want to achieve, and will treat you that way. And so you got to bear in mind that finding a community or finding a good group of people where you can laugh and take it easy and have a good time and still be learning is certainly going to help your experience in that department. All right, that's going to wrap up episode 667 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, you can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask a question, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter at thestartingzone, or you can join our Discord server, thestartingzone.com/Discord. We'll get you the link to join into there. And if you want to get your hands on some TSE gear, you can find that over at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/thestartingzone. Check out the designs on shirts and mugs and stickers and that kind of fun stuff. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
Best place to find me, you can find me over on Twitter at Shieldwald, or over on Blue Sky. It's jlucas.bsky.social over there. I do check both sites regularly. Most of the stuff that I post is probably on Blue Sky, but I do read both, so come say hi either place if you want to. Video channels are at twitch.tv/Shieldwald and youtube.com/Shieldwald. Streams are just offline for now, but I'll get back into it once we get patched and season 2 going. We'll stream some Undermine raid and stuff. So check those channels out. We'll get them going, once there's new stuff to be played.
Yeah, if you're trying to find me, you can find me over on Blue Sky again at spencerhd.bluesky.social, or on Twitter at Spencer_Downey, or over on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD, or on YouTube at youtube.com/@SpencerHD. There is also a Blue Sky account for the Starting Zone. You can go and give that one a follow too, Starting Zone at bluesky.social. And with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening, and jobs done.